Hey there, tonight we're diving into the grit and grime of colonial settlement life, where your morning juice might come with a side of dysentery. And the truth is, you'd be trading your cozy pillow for a bed of straw and fleas. If these stories help you unwind, I'd love a quick like or subscribe, but only if they're genuinely working for you. I'm curious where in the world you're listening from, so drop your location and local time in the comments. It's amazing seeing our little community span the globe through these historical tales. Now find your comfort zone, perhaps turn on a fan for that gentle background hum, and let's venture into tonight's story together. You awake to the sound of a rooster that's not exactly the soothing tones of a Spotify playlist. Welcome to your first morning in a colonial settlement. Forget about your usual routine of groggily reaching for your phone. Instead, you're staring at a wooden ceiling, and your day begins with a harsh reminder that the 1700 didn't come with a snooze button. After a few seconds of disbelief, you swing your legs over the side of the bed, which is really more of a straw-stuffed mattress that's seen better days, and plant your feet on a cold wooden floor. No plush carpet here. You're living the dream. If by dream you mean a rustic world where your first task is to brave the great outdoors just to relieve yourself. Say goodbye to indoor plumbing. This morning pit stop involves a brisk walk to the outhouse, and let's not sugarcoat it. Outhouses were little more than wooden closets with a hole in the ground, a far cry from your gleaming porcelain thrown back home. Now, feeling a bit more awake, it's time to wash up. Forget about turning a faucet. You're fetching water from a communal well. Don't drop the bucket because you'll need it to splash water on your face. Soap. If you're lucky, your household has a hunk of homemade lye soap, which is basically a mildly caustic block of cleanliness. Fancy a morning coffee? Too bad. Coffee isn't commonplace here unless you're well-to-do. Most likely, you'll be sipping on a warm bowl of porridge, which, on the bright side, is a decent energy boost for the day ahead. Before you can settle into your breakfast, it's already time to think about the economy, specifically the charming lack of paper currency. The 1700 are all about bartering. Your wallet is more likely filled with IOUs than cash. Got some extra eggs? Trade them for some flour. Need a new pair of breeches? Better have something worth swapping. In New England, for example, a pound of sugar could cost you a shilling or two, which means that Sweet Tooth needs some serious financial commitment. A cow might go for as much as £10, so you can imagine the kind of bartering gymnastics required when livestock gets involved. Now, you might be thinking, hey, I could just walk into a shop and buy what I need. Not so fast. Shops, if you can call them that, are more like general stores with limited stock, and the word convenience wasn't invented yet. The economic system revolves around what you can trade or what your credit will allow, and the idea of swiping a debit card is, well, centuries away from becoming reality. Between bites of porridge, you might ponder the bustling modern supermarket you left behind, with its aisles of goods and shiny carts. In this world, though, you're doing mental gymnastics to figure out if you can swap a dozen eggs for some desperately needed fabric. Think of it as real-life settlers of Catton, except not as fun and with more hunger pangs. By now, you might be considering the romanticized image of colonial life with its cozy hearths and simple living. But let's face it, nostalgia has a way of glossing over the fact that you're spending a good chunk of your morning just figuring out how not to freeze, starve, or go broke. If you're lucky, you might have a few pence tucked away for emergencies, but it's time to face the reality that your day revolves around survival more than leisure. With breakfast and economic strategizing out of the way, it's time to head out and face the day. A day that's going to make you grateful for every modern convenience you've probably ever taken for granted. But more on that later. Right now, you've got to get moving before the sun's high in the sky, and your to-do list grows even longer. So, lace up your boots, if you're fortunate enough to have them, and step out into a world where every day is a new chapter in a history book you never realized you were living. Ah, the romantic notion of stepping out into the fresh morning air, ready to seize the day. But let's hit pause on that idyllic scene because, in the colonial world, breakfast is not just a meal. It's a full-blown operation. Forget about a quick scramble of eggs or a Pop-Tart from the toaster. The very idea of a breakfast, routine, as you know it, would have colonists scratching their heads in bewilderment. Instead, you're diving into a process that starts with the basics. raw ingredients, and a hefty dose of elbow grease. Firstly, let's talk porridge. This is your staple, your go-to, your breakfast of champions, albeit the kind of champion who has to plough a field after consuming it. Porridge is the colonial equivalent of a granola bar, energy-packed and surprisingly versatile. But before you can dig in, there's the small matter of grinding grain. That's right, you'll be wielding a mortar and pestle, or if your luck's in, using a hand mill. It's not exactly a high-speed blender, but it gets the job done. And when I say job, I mean at least a solid hour of your morning. Water, of course, is another essential ingredient. Remember that communal well? Well, it's time to pay it another visit. Lugging a bucket of water to the hearth is your morning workout, and it's a lot less glamorous than your local gym. Once the water's boiling, you combine it with your freshly ground grain and stir, and stir, and stir some more. Welcome to the joys of cooking without a timer. You'll just know it's done when it's no longer crunchy. Now, about that cider. While the modern-day palate might associate cider with fall festivals and crisp autumn days, in colonial times, it was more like your all-day hydration strategy. Apple cider was the drink of choice, not just because it was delicious, but because water was often unsafe to drink on its own. Fermented just enough to kill off bacteria, cider was your safer bet. Kids drank it, adults drank it, pretty much everyone with a pulse drank it. And with apples being plentiful in places like New England, cider was as common as, well, not having indoor plumbing. But there's more to breakfast than just carbs and cider. If you're somewhat fortunate, you might have a piece of salted pork or a slab of cheese to accompany your meal. Salted pork was the bacon of its day, providing both protein and a real boost of flavor. The catch: you'd need to have salted it yourself, perhaps months ago, during a pig slaughtering session that makes your local butcher look like a walk in the park. Cheese, meanwhile, was often homemade, too, and a true labor of love. You know those artisanal cheese boards you splurge on at wine bars? Colonists didn't have the luxury of browsing through a selection, but they sure knew how to make the most of what they had. Now, as you're savoring, or at least tolerating, your porridge and cider, let's tackle another breakfast time revelation: tea, or rather the lack of it. This is where history gets a bit spicy. You see, tea wasn't just a comforting beverage. It was a political grenade. The 1773 Boston Tea Party wasn't just an excuse to dress up as Mohawk Indians and toss tea into the harbor. It was a protest against taxation without representation, a rallying cry for what would become the American Revolution. So, if you're sipping on tea in the colonies, you might be making a statement without even saying a word. But let's debunk a myth while we're here. You might imagine colonial breakfasts as hearty, wholesome affairs, filling the room with the aroma of freshly baked bread and roasting meats. Not quite. For many colonists, breakfast was about survival, plain and simple. The well-to-do might enjoy a more varied spread, but for the average settler, morning meals were utilitarian. The romantic image of a bustling kitchen, full of laughter and the clinking of cups, part fantasy, part reality. Sure, families gathered around the table, but more often than not, they were also planning their day, discussing crop rotations, or lamenting the latest crop blight. Economics played a huge role in what ended up on your plate. Sugar, for instance, was a luxury item, an indulgence for those who could afford it. A sweet tooth in colonial America was more of a liability than a delight. The cost of sugar was prohibitive, and its use was rationed like a precious commodity. Honey served as a more common sweetener, but even that required beekeeping skills and a fair bit of luck. Now, as you finish your porridge and cider, consider this: your breakfast wasn't just about filling your stomach. It was a reflection of your place in the colonial social hierarchy, a testament to your resourcefulness, and a nod to the political landscape shaping the world beyond your doorstep. Every meal was a microcosm of colonial life, flavored with the realities of self-sufficiency and the constant dance of survival. By the time you've cleaned up, which is a whole other saga involving more trips to the well and a fair amount of scrubbing, it's clear that breakfast here isn't just the most important meal of the day. It's practically a day in itself. And with that, you push back your chair, or wooden stool, realistically, and gear up for the next chapter of your colonial adventure. The morning's work has only just begun, and the day stretches ahead like an endless frontier, full of challenges, opportunities, and the occasional surprise. But for now, let's leave the breakfast table behind and step into the bustling world beyond the kitchen. You've got a history lesson to live, and as you'll soon discover, it's never quite what you expect. Stepping away from the breakfast table, or more accurately, the scene of your morning survival tactics, you'd be forgiven for thinking that the day might offer a bit of respite. But hold onto your tricorn hat, because in a colonial settlement, midday means it's time to roll up those sleeves and dive headfirst into the grind of daily labor. First up, let's talk farming. If you fancy yourself a modern-day green thumb, colonial farming will have you rethinking your life choices quicker than a rabbit in a carrot patch. The average colonial farm was a sprawling affair, often requiring the energy equivalent of running a marathon just to get through one day. Forget about tractors, or even your trusty ride-on mower. You're relying on a plough, usually pulled by oxen, if you're lucky enough to own them. Otherwise, it's you, the plough, and a hefty dose of elbow grease. The colonial farmer's day was as regimented as a military drill. Sunrise wasn't just a picturesque view, it was your cue to hit the fields. Each acre of land demanded attention, with crops like corn, wheat, and barley being the staples of survival. It wasn't just about planting and harvesting either. You had to wrestle with Mother Nature more than you'd care to. Think droughts, floods, and pests, all without the benefit of modern pesticides or weather apps. If you were a blacksmith, your day wasn't much easier. Picture a forge, blazing with the intensity of a small sun, and you're halfway there. Blacksmithing was the colonial equivalent of a tech startup, indispensable, labor-intensive, and often a solitary venture. Your tools were your lifeline, and maintaining them was as crucial as crafting the horseshoes, nails, and tools that the community relied on. Each strike of the hammer was a testament to skill and endurance, not to mention the patience of a saint. Sweat and soot were your constant companions, and the risk of burns or worse was just part of the job description. And let's not forget the apprenticeships, which were the career ladders of the colonial world. Picture a teenager, not glued to a smartphone, but instead shadowing a master craftsman, learning the trade over several years. This wasn't an internship with a promise of a corner office. It was a long-term commitment, often lasting 7 years, where the apprentice lived with the master, ate at their table, and worked their fingers to the bone in exchange for knowledge, and eventually a trade of their own. Sure, it sounds romantic in a wax-on, wax-off kind of way, but the reality was more like sweat-on, callous-off. Economic structures of the time were built on the backbone of such skilled labor. In a world without machines, human expertise was the currency of the realm. A skilled blacksmith, cooper, or carpenter could command respect and a steady stream of work, but that didn't guarantee wealth. Payment was often in goods or credit, as actual coinage was rarer than a colonial bath day. Speaking of which, leisure time was more myth than reality. After a grueling day in the fields or the forge, your options for relaxation were limited, to say the least. Maybe you gather for a community event or a church service, but don't expect weekend getaways or Netflix marathons. Evenings were for mending tools, patching clothes, and preparing for the next day. The idea of a simple life is appealing, but simplicity often meant a relentless focus on survival. So, what about the romantic notion of a colonial community, all cozy hearths and neighborly camaraderie? Sure, there was a sense of community. Everyone relied on each other for trade, protection, and social structure. But this wasn't a utopia of constant barn dances and quilting bees. Disputes over land boundaries or resources could flare up like a bad case of poison ivy, and the pressure to maintain your livelihood was always there, simmering beneath the surface. In short, the colonial life wasn't for the faint-hearted. It demanded resilience, ingenuity, and a fair amount of grit. Those who thrived were the ones who could adapt quickly and work tirelessly. The romantic image of pastoral landscapes and quaint villages, lovely in paintings, but on the ground, it was a constant juggling act of labor, luck, and a touch of lunacy. As the sun begins its descent, casting long shadows over the settlement, you're reminded that each day is a battle won in the ongoing war of existence. The simple life, it turns out, is anything but simple. But as you wipe the sweat from your brow and survey the fruits of your labor, there's a certain satisfaction in knowing you're part of a history that's as rich and diverse as the land itself. So, take a moment to catch your breath. Tomorrow promises more of the same, and the story of survival continues. As the sun dips lower, casting a golden glow over the settlement, it's easy to imagine a world of eternal sunsets and neighborly potlucks. But let's peel back the sepia-toned filter and get real about colonial community life. Afternoons in a colonial settlement weren't spent lounging on the porch with a mint julep. Instead, they were a delicate dance of social maneuvering and the occasional spat over whose cow trampled whose corn. Social gatherings were the lifeblood of community cohesion, and church services doubled as the colonial version of a social media feed, minus the trolls, but with all the gossip. Services were usually held on Sundays and lasted for hours. Yes, hours. You wouldn't just pop in for a quick sermon and then hit brunch. This was a marathon of moral instruction, social observation, and let's be honest, a bit of judgment. The church was also where you caught up on the latest news, like who had a new baby or whose barn mysteriously caught fire. Spoiler alert, it was often the same folks whose Sunday attire was a bit too fancy for their apparent means. But it wasn't all fire and brimstone. These gatherings were also a chance to let your hair, or whatever you could fit under a bonnet, down. Dances, quilting bees, and barn raisings were the colonial version of a block party, complete with fiddles, cider, and a good dose of neighborly competition. Think of it as the original social network, where everyone knew your business, and privacy was as scarce as imported silk stockings. Speaking of which, let's talk about the colonial justice system, where privacy might not have been a right, but public shaming sure was a spectacle. Picture this. You're in a colonial court, where justice could be as swift as it was severe. Forget innocent until proven guilty. Back then, you'd be lucky if the judge didn't have a personal vendetta or wasn't nursing a hangover from the night before. Take the infamous case of the Salem witch trials in 1692, where spectral evidence, testimony based on dreams and visions, was enough to send you to the gallows. Over 200 people were accused, and 20 were executed. Talk about a bad day in court. And if you were caught stealing or slandering your neighbor, you might find yourself in the stocks, a wooden contraption designed to hold your head and hands while the townspeople got creative with their choice of projectiles. A rotten tomato to the face was just the beginning. Colonial law was a curious blend of English common law and local statutes, and let's just say the line between justice and personal vendetta was blurrier than a foggy New England morning. Punishments ranged from fines and flogging to more creative sentences like the ducking stool for scolds, women accused of being too outspoken. It was a harsh world where your reputation was everything, and the community's moral compass was set to judgmental. And then there was the political climate, a simmering cauldron of resentment that would eventually boil over into revolution. Taxes imposed by distant British rulers were about as popular as a snowstorm in April. The Stamp Act of 1765, for example, imposed a tax on paper goods, from newspapers to playing cards, and it was met with about as much enthusiasm as a wet blanket. Colonists were expected to pay, yet they had no representation in Parliament, a situation that didn't sit well with anyone who had ever had to pay for something they didn't want. The Townshend Acts of 1767 slapped duties on tea, glass, and paint, further inflaming tensions. These taxes weren't just financial burdens. They were daily reminders of colonial subjugation. And when the British soldiers were sent over to enforce these laws, things got even more heated. Picture a colony where redcoats and settlers glared at each other across muddy streets, each side convinced the other was ruining their lives. Resistance brewed like a strong cup of that now-taxed tea, culminating in events like the Boston Massacre in 1770, where British soldiers fired into a crowd, killing 5 colonists. It was a public relations disaster for the British, and a rallying point for colonists who were sick of being treated like second-class subjects. Spoiler alert, those tensions didn't exactly simmer down with time. In the late afternoons, as the community gathered to discuss these weighty matters, you could feel the undercurrent of change. Taverns became hotbeds of political discussion, where men like Samuel Adams and Paul Revere plotted their next moves over mugs of ale. These gatherings were a heady mix of debate, camaraderie, and no small amount of liquid courage. They were the birthplace of a new American identity, one that valued liberty and representation over loyalty to a distant crown. But let's not romanticize too much. The road to revolution was paved with as many arguments and setbacks as it was victories. Colonists were divided, with many remaining loyal to the British crown, leading to rifts that split families and communities. And while the narrative of scrappy rebels taking on a tyrant makes for great storytelling, the reality was more complicated. It was a time of uncertainty, where alliances shifted like sand, and the outcome was far from assured. As the day winds down and the shadows lengthen, you can almost hear the whispers of history being made. The world is on the brink of change, and the air is thick with possibility. Tomorrow promises more challenges, more debates, and the relentless march toward a future that's still being forged with every decision, every conversation, every small act of defiance. The story of colonial America is far from over, and as you prepare to step into the evening, you're more than just a spectator. You're part of the unfolding drama that will define a nation. As the sun finally bows out, making way for the Inkai curtain of night, the colonial settlement shifts gears from a day of toil to an evening of storytelling and music. You might think of it as the Netflix of the 1700, except instead of binging the latest series, you're hanging onto every word of a yarn spun by your neighbor, who, let's be honest, is more reliable than the local news crier. These evening gatherings are the emotional glue of colonial life, a chance for families and neighbors to come together in the flickering warmth of the hearth. The fire crackles, casting dancing shadows on the walls, while voices mingle with the sound of a fiddle or maybe a homemade flute, crafted from a hollow reed, no less. Songs often tell tales of adventure or moral lessons, sometimes even poking fun at the British, who, let's face it, aren't exactly anyone's favorite topic right now. Storytelling isn't just about passing the time. It's a crucial way to transmit knowledge and community values. With literacy rates varying widely, about 60% for men and 30% for women in New England, a stark contrast to the more educated society of today, oral tradition is the lifeblood of cultural continuity. In a world where books are rare treasures and schools are often one-room affairs, stories carry the weight of history, morality, and even survival skills. They are the original podcast, with the added benefit of keeping you warm as you huddle close to your fellow listeners. Religion, of course, plays a starring role in these evening gatherings. The Puritans of New England, for instance, are known for their strict beliefs, which seep into every aspect of life, including education. The Massachusetts school law of 1647, known as the Old Deluder Satan Act, requires towns of a certain size to establish schools to teach children to read the Bible. Because, heaven forbid, Satan should find a loophole in your literacy skills. It's a clever bit of legislation that ties together moral instruction and education, ensuring that future generations can both fend off eternal damnation and read a ledger. Family dynamics, meanwhile, aren't exactly the nuclear variety you might see in a 1950s sitcom. Colonial families are large, often with 10 or more children, which sounds like a lot until you realize that high infant mortality rates, around 15%, mean that not every child makes it to adulthood. Children are expected to contribute to the household from a young age, whether it's fetching water or helping with the crops. And while the patriarchal structure places the father figure as the head of the household, women wield significant influence, running the home and managing the family's resources with a deft hand. Let's dispel the myth of the colonial family as perpetually harmonious. Sure, there's unity, but there are also disagreements, especially when it comes to discipline. Spare the rod and spoil the child is more than a saying. It's practically a doctrine. Children are expected to be obedient and reverent, and any deviation from this can result in stern correction. You could say colonial discipline is a bit like the weather, unpredictable, often harsh, but nearly always looming. As the evening wears on, the flickering firelight and the hum of conversation create a cocoon of camaraderie. There's a shared understanding among the settlers, a recognition of the resilience required to carve out a life in such a demanding environment. Each person, from the eldest patriarch to the youngest child, plays a role in the survival of the community. It's a delicate balance of independence and interdependence, where every day is a testament to human endurance. As you sit among them, you can't help but marvel at the sheer tenacity required to thrive in this world. The romantic image of colonial life as a simple, idyllic existence is both true and false. It's true in its simplicity, where life is stripped down to its essentials, but it's false in its portrayal of ease. Survival demands every ounce of strength, creativity, and cooperation. The settler's legacy is one of grit and determination, a reminder that while the past is often idealized, the reality was far more rugged. In the quiet moments as the night deepens, you might reflect on the enduring legacy of colonial life. It's tempting to view these settlers as relics of a bygone era, but their influence is woven into the fabric of modern society. From the democratic ideals that sparked a revolution to the community values that shaped the American ethos, the echoes of colonial resilience are all around us. So as you prepare to leave this historical journey, consider this. The story of colonial America is not just a chapter in a textbook. It's a living narrative, a testament to the human spirit's ability to adapt and endure. And while you might not trade your modern comforts for a straw mattress and a pit toilet, there's a certain respect owed to those who did. They laid the groundwork for a nation, and in their struggles and triumphs, we find both a cautionary tale and a source of inspiration. In the end, colonial life is a complex tapestry of hardship and hope, a reminder that history is not just a series of dates and events, but a vibrant mosaic of human experience. As you step back into your own time, you carry with you a deeper understanding of the past and an appreciation for the resilience that continues to shape our world. And who knows, maybe you'll even find yourself sharing a story or two, keeping the tradition alive in your own way. Victorian England, where the streets were cobblestoned and the class divide was as wide as the Thames. You're an educated woman in this era, and let me tell you, that doesn't mean you're set for a life of luxury and leisure. Nope, you're smack in the middle of a societal shift that's as chaotic as a Dickensian plot twist. Industrialization's in full swing, factories are belching smoke, and the middle class is growing faster than you can say. Industrial revolution. But here's the kicker. As the middle class boomed, so did the demand for governesses. And not because everyone suddenly decided kids should learn the finer points of French and piano with a dose of algebra on the side. Why the governess boom, you ask? Well, the rising middle class needed to keep up appearances. You wouldn't want little Marley and Johnny growing up to be, gasp, Carmen. They needed to be cultured. Who better to provide that education than you? A well-read woman from a respectable, albeit not wealthy, family. It was like the ultimate Victorian balancing act. Enough education to teach, but not enough to question the social order. You're the Goldilocks of the job market, finding the position that's just right because there are so few options for women like you. Here's the economic reality. Less than 10% of the population was considered wealthy or upper class. Meanwhile, a vast chunk of society was scrambling to climb out of poverty. But the middle class, they were the social climbers, the ones who wanted to show they'd made it. They invested in governesses like a modern-day family might invest in after-school activities, essential for keeping up with the Joneses, or in this case, the Darcys and the Bennets. But let's not romanticize this gig. The reality of being a governess wasn't all silk dresses and afternoon teas. It was more like being caught in a social no-man's land. You weren't quite a servant, but let's not kid ourselves. You weren't family either. You were the educational equivalent of a ghost, seen but not heard, flitting between the nursery and your tiny room, the latter possibly an attic space, so cramped it had its own postcode. This era, known for its prudishness and propriety, was anything but kind to women seeking independence. Options for educated women were about as limited as a Victorian diet. A little bloomer scandal, anyone. You could become a teacher, but that was often synonymous with being a governess, or you could hope for marriage, though that was hardly a career. Now, let's tackle the romantic notion of the governess, shall we? It's been painted as this dreamy job where you mold young minds and sip tea in sunlit parlors. Think Jane Eyre finding love in the arms of brooding Mr. Rochester. But here's the truth. The average governess was more likely to find herself in a drafty manner, mediating the squabbles of her young charges while trying to keep her distance from the master of the house, not out of romance, but out of self-preservation. Because, surprise, surprise, the power dynamics were as skewed as a penny farthing. And speaking of skewed, let's discuss pay. Yeah, if you're a governess, you're not exactly rolling in pounds. The average salary was about £25 to £40 a year. To put that into perspective, that's less than an entry-level factory worker, though you probably wouldn't want that job either, unless you fancy losing a limb to machinery. Those wages were barely enough to cover your personal expenses, let alone save anything for the future. It was like being paid in buttons, while the family you worked for hoarded the gold coins. So, you're performing this tightrope act, trying to maintain your dignity while being underpaid and overworked. And the social standing. Well, let's just say you're a step above a scullery maid, but leagues below the lady of the house. You exist in a peculiar limbo where you're educated enough to teach, but not enough to transcend your social station. In this era of steam engines and shifting social norms, the governess was a necessary cog in the Victorian machine. Families needed you to ensure their children weren't just educated, but polished. You were the bridge between the practical world of the middle class and the genteel aspirations of the upper class. But that bridge was a rickety one, fraught with the dangers of isolation, financial insecurity, and the ever-present possibility of falling from grace. And just like that, you find yourself in this whirlwind of social change, a woman of intellect in a world that didn't quite know what to do with you. As the middle class rises, so does the demand for your services. Yet the role of a governess remains a peculiar paradox, necessary yet marginalized, romanticized yet starkly real. So, as you sit there, perhaps by candlelight, contemplating your lot in life, know this: you're not alone. Thousands of women are navigating this strange new world right alongside you, each one trying to find her place in the ever-shifting sands of Victorian society. In this whirlwind of social change, you're not just a governess. You're a reluctant time traveler stuck in a corset. Welcome to a day in your life where the sun rises, and so do you, before it, actually. The Victorian governess day was like a never-ending loop of morning duties that could make a hamster wheel seem like a luxury cruise. You're up at the crack of dawn, because who needs sleep when you've got Latin conjugations to prep and Mozart to master? The day kicks off with breakfast, but don't expect a leisurely brunch with avocado toast. You might grab a quick bite in the schoolroom if you're lucky, while your stomach grumbles louder than a steam engine. Then it's off to the races, lessons. You're responsible for turning the children into little prodigies, which means juggling arithmetic, history, and the art of not spilling ink all over their painfully starched collars. A governess's work hours were brutal. You're clocking in around 12 to 14 hours a day, 6 days a week. That's right, Saturdays are just another day at the office, minus casual Fridays. Your charges, they range from adorable cherubs to veritable terrors, and navigating their moods is an art form in itself. Pity the governess who lands in a household where the children see her as an interloper. You're their teacher, but also their disciplinarian, and sometimes even their confidante. It's a delicate dance, this tightrope walk between authority and affection. And speaking of tightrope, let's not forget the thin line you walk with the rest of the household staff. You're not quite their equal, but you're definitely not the lady of the house either. It's like being stuck in a social Venn diagram where the circles just refuse to overlap. Isolation is your constant companion. Sure, you're surrounded by people, but when it comes to meaningful adult interaction, you might as well be marooned on a deserted island with only algebra and Shakespeare for company. Your evenings, if not consumed by more lessons or correcting schoolwork, are spent in your tiny room, which would barely pass as a closet in today's real estate market. It's a space so cramped that you've got to be careful not to knock over your single candle while you read. And read you do, because books are your escape, your solace, and your silent rebellion against the confines of your reality. Now, let's talk social status. You're a woman educated enough to teach, but not enough to stand shoulder to shoulder with the family you serve. You're the ultimate paradox, a bridge between the social classes that everyone's too busy to cross. You attend family outings, but you're the shadow in the carriage. You dine with the children, not the adults, because heaven forbid you disrupt the social hierarchy. It's a limbo only Dante could appreciate. Primary sources from the time paint a vivid picture of this peculiar existence. Take Anne Bronte, for example, who turned her experiences as a governess into the novel Agnes Grey. Her protagonist's struggles with unruly children and dismissive employers weren't just fiction. They were a reflection of Anne's own frustrations. And then there's the diary of Ellen Wheaton, whose entries from the early 19th century reveal her isolation and financial troubles as a governess. She once wrote, "I feel like a stranger under this roof," capturing the emotional toll of being an outsider in what was supposed to be her home away from home. The physical toll isn't any kinder. You're running on minimal sleep, your meals are hit or miss, And let's not even mention the cold. Those drafty homes could rival the Arctic, and you're expected to soldier on, wrapped in layers upon layers, trying to keep your wits and your fingers from freezing. It's enough to make you long for the simpler discomforts of a factory floor. Well, almost. But despite the hardships, there's something undeniably romantic about the Governess myth. Maybe it's the idea of noble suffering, the notion that you're shaping the future, one fidgety pupil at a time. Or perhaps it's the hope that you're just one brooding employer away from a Jane Eyre ending. But here's the rub. For every Charlotte Bronte, there are countless women whose stories ended not in romance, but in obscurity. The reality is that most governesses faced a lifetime of financial uncertainty and social invisibility, their contributions forgotten in the annals of history, like footnotes in the margins of a grander narrative. So, as you navigate this complex web of expectations and realities, remember that you're part of a unique sisterhood. You're not just educating the next generation, you're defying the limitations imposed by a society that's still figuring out what to do with women like you. Amidst the isolation, the long hours, and the ambiguous status, you're leaving an indelible mark on the world, even if it's one that history might overlook. And with that, as the evening draws to a close and you snuff out your candle, you're left with your thoughts, your books, and perhaps a glimmer of hope that tomorrow might bring a little more understanding, a little more respect, and maybe, just maybe, a slightly warmer room. And just like that, as the embers of your candle flicker out, so too does any semblance of financial security. Let's face it, being a governess in Victorian England was like playing a constant game of economic limbo. How low can you go before you're financially flatlined? It's about time we dissect the grim reality of your pay packet, or lack thereof, with the kind of scrutiny usually reserved for a Sherlock Holmes investigation. First, let's crunch some numbers, because who doesn't love a good dose of fiscal despair? The average salary for a governess was between £25 and £40 a year. Now, before you get any funny ideas about converting that into today's currency and dreaming of a modest fortune, let me burst that bubble with a pin the size of Big Ben. In 1850, average annual salary for a male clerk was around £100, and a skilled craftsman could earn up to £150. Even a lowly factory worker, risking life and limb amidst the clattering looms, could take home about £20 to £30. So, yes, the governess was slightly above the factory floor, but in the economic hierarchy, she was still just shy of the basement. And while you might think that living in the family home could save you on rent, let's not forget your room was more like a glorified storage closet. Plus, you had personal expenses to cover, clothing, toiletries, and the occasional penny dreadful to keep your spirits marginally elevated. If you wanted to squirrel away any savings, you'd have to be as frugal as Scrooge before his ghostly visits. It's no wonder many governesses found themselves in debt, living paycheck to candlelit paycheck. Job security. This was as elusive as a decent cup of Victorian coffee. You see, being a governess was a gig economy before gig economies were cool. Families could, and did, dismiss governesses at the drop of a top hat, often without notice or severance. A child could age out of needing education, or a family might hit a financial snag, and boom, you're out of a job faster than a steam engine can belch smoke. And finding a new position, that was like trying to find a needle in a haystack when you're armed with nothing but a spoon. Now, let's talk about the social safety net, which, spoiler alert, didn't really exist. If you were fortunate, you might have a family to fall back on, but given that most governesses took the job out of necessity, chances are your family wasn't exactly rolling in pounds either. There were a few charitable institutions and governess benevolent societies, like the Governess's Benevolent Institution, founded in 1843, which provided some aid to those in dire straits. But such help was limited, and often came with a side of social stigma, because nothing says, we care, like making you feel guilty for needing help in the first place. So how did governesses manage to make ends meet, you ask? Well, some took on additional tutoring gigs, teaching music or languages to supplement their meager income. Others, like Mary Wollstonecraft and the Brontes, turned to writing. Wollstonecraft's Thoughts on the Education of Daughters, and Anne Bronte's Agnes Grey, weren't just for catharsis. They were a financial lifeline. But for every Wollstonecraft or Bronte, There were countless women who simply couldn't find a way to escape the economic quicksand. And then there was the hope, however faint, that you might catch the eye of a well-to-do bachelor. The governess marrying her employer was a plotline straight out of a Victorian romance novel, and while it happened occasionally, it was about as common as a sunny London day. For most, the prospect of marriage was less about romance and more about financial necessity. But even here, the odds weren't in your favor. Many families saw governesses as unsuitable matrimonial material due to their ambiguous social standing. Despite these realities, the myth of the governess as a romantic figure persists. Maybe it's the allure of the underdog, the notion that amidst the bleakness, there's a chance for triumph. Or perhaps it's the idea of education as empowerment, a subtle rebellion against a society that pigeonholed women into domestic roles. But let's not kid ourselves. For most governesses, the role was less about shaping the future and more about surviving the present. As we peel back the layers of this complex narrative, it's clear that the governess was a paradox, a symbol of both progress and oppression. She was educated yet underpaid, independent yet marginalized. Her story is a reminder that history is full of contradictions, where the romance of the past often masks the harsh realities faced by those who lived it. So as you navigate this world of economic uncertainty and social ambiguity, take heart. You're part of a long line of women who dared to carve out a place for themselves in a world that wasn't quite ready for them. And that, dear listener, is a legacy worth remembering. But hold on, don't hang up your chalkboard just yet. There's more to this story, and in our next installment, we'll delve deeper into the social dynamics at play and how these shape the lives of women like you. Because let's be honest, the Victorian era is anything but a one-act play. Stay tuned, because the drama is just getting started. Okay, so buckle up, because we're diving into the murky waters of Victorian literature and media, where governesses were the original influencers, minus the sponsorship deals and Instagram filters. You ever heard of a narrative glow-up? It's what novels did for the governess gig. They took a job that was basically social purgatory and turned it into a romantic escapade, with a side of existential dread. First off, let's talk about how literature shaped the governess myth. In the 19th century, novels were the Netflix of their day, and everyone from Charles Dickens to the Bronte sisters had a take on the governess trope. But here's the catch. While the novelists were busy painting governesses as tragic heroines, real-life governesses were often too busy dodging financial disaster to notice they'd become literary icons. Take Charlotte Bronte's Jane Eyre, for example. It's the OG governess novel, spinning the tale of an orphan teacher who finds love with her mysterious employer, Mr. Rochester. Sounds dreamy, right? But let's get real. For every Jane Eyre landing a brooding millionaire, there were countless governesses whose closest romantic encounter was with a teacup. And sure, the novel tackles themes of independence and morality, but it's more an exception than the rule. Most governesses were more likely to end up as the unnoticed spinster than a starry-eyed bride. Speaking of spinsterhood, let's not forget Anne Bronte's Agnes Grey. A less romanticized account, it delves into the nitty-gritty of governess life, with tales of bratty children and dismissive employers. Agnes's struggles are a far cry from Jane's romantic triumph, highlighting the isolation and financial instability that real governesses faced. Anne Bronte wasn't just writing fiction. She was throwing down some serious social commentary, like the 19th century version of a Twitter thread. But what about the newspapers, you ask? Well, if novels were the box office hits, newspapers were the tabloids, and they weren't shy about playing up the governess stereotype. Media often portrayed governesses as tragic figures who, despite their education, were doomed to a life of genteel poverty. There were stories of governesses who ended up destitute, their plight serving as cautionary tales for young women dreaming of independence. It was like reading a Victorian version of Don't Quit Your Day Job. One infamous case that made the rounds was that of Mary Ann Stowe, a governess whose tragic end was splashed across the papers in the 1850. Stowe died in a workhouse, and her story was used to highlight the lack of security for women in her position. It was a stark reminder that the reality of being a governess was often as grim as the fog rolling in off the Thames. Now, let's bust some myths. The romantic notion of a governess as a young woman on a quest for love and adventure. Yeah, not so much. Socially, they were in a bind. Their education set them apart from servants, but their lack of wealth barred them from the drawing rooms of the elite. It was like being stuck in a never-ending episode of Downton Abbey, minus the witty banter and romantic subplots. And let's talk about the stereotype of the governess as a moral compass. Victorian literature often painted them as paragons of virtue, tasked with instilling high moral standards in their charges. In reality, many governesses were just trying to keep the kids from turning the nursery into a war zone. The pressure to be both educator and moral guide was immense, and one misstep could see you out on your ear faster than you could say character development. Economically, the governess role was a precarious tightrope walk. Those £25 to £40 a year, that's assuming you even got paid on time. A letter in the Times from 1848 details the plight of a governess who had not been paid for 6 months. It's like working for exposure, but with more corsets and fewer networking opportunities. Despite this, the governess role held a certain allure. It was one of the few avenues for educated women to maintain a semblance of independence, even if it was more illusion than reality. For many, it was a stepping stone, a way to delay marriage, or in some cases, avoid it altogether. It was a chance to be part of the intellectual world, even if your contributions were largely unrecognized. So why did this romanticized image persist? Perhaps it was the allure of the underdog story, the idea that a governess could rise above her station and find love and happiness. Or maybe it was the Victorian obsession with moral tales. The idea that a virtuous young woman could triumph over adversity appealed to society's sense of justice and order. But whatever the reason, the myth of the governess as a romantic figure endures, reflection of our need to find meaning and hope in even the most challenging circumstances. As we peel back the layers on this complex narrative, it's clear that the governess was both a symbol of progress and a cautionary tale. Her story is a reminder that the past is full of contradictions, where the romance of history often masks the harsh realities faced by those who lived it. And as we continue this journey through the Victorian era, remember, the drama is far from over. There's more to explore, more myths to bust, and more stories to uncover. So stay tuned, because the plot is only thickening. So here we are, at the dusk of our deep dive into the Victorian governess saga, a role that was as romanticized as it was ruthlessly real. But let's not leave you hanging in a fog of historical glamour. The real drama of the governess didn't end with the 19th century. It evolved, like a plot twist that keeps the pages turning well into the sequel. As the 19th century shuffled into the 20th, the role of the governess didn't vanish like a London fog, but it did undergo a serious makeover. The winds of change were blowing, and they weren't just rustling the pages of Bronte novels. The Education Act of 1870 was a game-changer, making elementary education compulsory for children in England and Wales. Suddenly, the schoolyard became the new battleground for social status, leaving the governess to pivot faster than a Victorian lady could fan herself at a scandalous ball. By the early 20th century, the demand for governesses was on the decline, but don't start playing the funeral dirge just yet. Instead, these women found new opportunities in public and private schools, places that were springing up like daisies in response to the Education Act. This shift wasn't just about location. It was a seismic change in employment dynamics and gender roles. Women were finally stepping into the classroom as recognized educators, not just the shadowy figures in the nursery. But let's not sugarcoat it. This transition wasn't all sunshine and accolades. Women faced fierce resistance in the workplace, where the glass ceiling was still as thick as the smog over Victorian London. Despite their qualifications, female teachers often earned a fraction of what their male counterparts did. Sound familiar? This gender pay gap was a stubborn relic, a hangover from the days when a woman's work was considered more a hobby than a vocation. As for the legacy of the governess, it's a tale as twisted as a Victorian melodrama. On one hand, the role challenged societal norms and offered women a modicum of independence in a world that preferred them tied to the hearth. On the other hand, it reinforced class distinctions, keeping women in a perpetual state of limbo, educated enough to teach, but not quite enough to break free from the social shackles. The governess also left an indelible mark on literature and popular culture, forever immortalized as both the tragic heroine and the noble educator. This duality is what makes the Governess such a compelling figure. She represents the struggle and the triumph, the romance and the reality, a mirror reflecting the complexities of the era itself. So what about the broader implications for gender roles and employment inequality? Fast forward to today, and the echoes of the Governess's plight are still heard in the corridors of power and education. The fight for equal pay continues, while the struggle for women to balance professional aspirations with societal expectations remains a juggling act worthy of a Victorian circus. Yet, the Governess's story is one of quiet revolution. She was a pioneer, navigating a world that wasn't quite ready for her ambition, yet she forged a path that future generations would expand upon. In the end, the Victorian Governess was more than just a footnote in history. She was a testament to resilience in the face of systemic inequality, a reminder that progress is often slow but inevitable. Her legacy is woven into the fabric of social change, a thread connecting past to present, showing us that even in the constraints of corsets and class, women have always found ways to push boundaries. So there you have it, the saga of the Victorian Governess, a tale of grit, grace, and gumption. As you tuck this story away, remember, history isn't just about what happened. It's about how it shapes us. And the Governess, she's not just a relic of the past, but a beacon for the future, proving that even in the darkest times, there's a light to guide the way. In the grand tapestry of history, the Achaemenid Empire is like that one overachieving cousin who managed to conquer half the known world, while the rest of us were busy trying to remember where we left our keys. At its height, in the 5th century BCE, this behemoth stretched from the Indus Valley to the Aegean Sea, like a massive, ancient game of Risk that just kept going. But unlike your average game night, this wasn't just about rolling dice and hoping for the best. It was about managing a complex social structure that made a modern corporate ladder look like a kiddie slide. At the top of this ancient hierarchy was the King of Kings, or as he might be known in today's HR department, the CEO of Persia, Inc. This guy wasn't just a king. He was the king of all kings. Think of him as a regal deity with a penchant for administration. Darius I, who ruled from 522 to 486 BCE, was a master of bureaucracy. He divided the empire into satrapies, which were like ancient provinces with satraps acting as regional managers, responsible for collecting taxes, managing local affairs, and occasionally getting too big for their golden britches. But let's not get too carried away with the idea of the omnipotent Persian emperor. The truth is, ruling an empire that vast was like playing a never-ending game of whack-a-mole. For every problem you smacked down in one corner of the empire, another popped up 1,000 miles away. The satraps, those regional governors, were supposed to be the king's eyes and ears. But sometimes they acted more like they were auditioning for their own reality TV spin-off. Persia's got autonomy. Take the story of Orotes, the satrap of Lydia. This guy decided he was more of a pirate king than a bureaucrat, so he went rogue, capturing the island of Samos and executing its ruler just for kicks. Sure, he got away with it for a while, but eventually Darius was forced to send an assassin to deal with him. It's a classic example of when middle management goes wrong. Below the satraps, the social ladder was as complex as a soap opera plotline. You had the nobility, who were basically the board of directors, enjoying lands and privileges as long as they kept the empire running smoothly. Then came the artisans and tradespeople, the empire's skilled workers, who kept the economic engines humming with everything from textiles to metalwork. These folks were the ancient equivalents of your IT department, often overlooked, but absolutely vital. And let's not forget the farmers, who were the backbone of the empire, much like the interns who keep the coffee flowing in an office. They worked the fertile lands of Mesopotamia and Egypt, ensuring that the empire's breadbasket never emptied. Without them, the grand cities of Persepolis and Susa might have been little more than empty husks. The common people, including laborers and slaves, formed the base of this social pyramid. They were as essential to the empire's success as the servers are to your favorite streaming service. Slavery in the Achaemenid Empire wasn't quite the same as it would be in later historical settings. It was often more about indebtedness, and less about the brutal chattel slavery seen in other eras. But let's be clear, it was still no picnic. These folks weren't exactly lining up for the job. What's fascinating about the Achaemenid social structure is how it managed to hold together despite its sprawling size. The empire's success lay in its ability to integrate a multitude of peoples and cultures, with over 70 ethnic groups calling it home. It was like a massive ancient melting pot, a testament to the empire's administrative genius and its ability to adapt. The romantic image of the Persian king as an all-powerful ruler lounging in opulent palaces while his subjects toiled away is as flattering as it is misleading. The reality was much more complex. The king needed the support of his satraps and their local knowledge to maintain control. It was a delicate balance of power, a bit like a corporate board meeting where everyone has their own agenda but pretends to be on the same page. The Achaemenid kings also understood the importance of public relations. They invested heavily in monumental architecture and grand ceremonies, which helped to project an image of power and stability. The royal road, stretching over 500 miles from Sardis to Susa, was not just a marvel of engineering, but a message of connectivity and control. The king could send messages across the empire in a matter of days, a speed that would make even modern postal services envious. All in all, the social structure of the Achaemenid Empire was a masterclass in ancient governance, a complex web of power dynamics that kept the empire running smoothly for over 2 centuries. It's a reminder that even in the ancient world, success wasn't just about brute force. It was about smart management and knowing when to delegate responsibility, even if your regional managers had a tendency to go off script. So, next time you're stuck in a seemingly endless meeting, spare a thought for the Achaemenid king. After all, ruling an empire was a bit like managing a never-ending conference call with regional managers who sometimes preferred to hit mute and do their own thing. It's comforting to know that even in ancient times, the struggle to keep everything running smoothly was very, very real. And speaking of keeping things running smoothly, let's talk about the infamous Royal Road, ancient Persia's answer to next-day delivery. This was no dirt path for wandering sheep herders. Measuring a whopping 677 miles from Sardis to Susa, it was the backbone of the empire, a superhighway of sorts that made sure news, goods, and those all-important tax records flowed like water down a well-oiled aqueduct. Think of the Royal Road as the Achaemenid Empire's version of fiber-optic cables, but without the pesky buffering. Couriers, known as angerium, try saying that 5 times fast, could cover the entire distance in just 7 days. That's right, 7 days. In an era when most folks considered a 5-mile hike a grueling expedition, these couriers were basically the Usain Bolts of their time. Herodotus, the world's first travel reviewer, famously noted, "Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor gloom of night stays these couriers from the swift completion of their appointed rounds." If that sounds familiar, it's because some postal services today are still trying to live up to that ancient PR. Now, you might be thinking that such a feat of engineering must have cost the empire a pretty penny, and you'd be right. Maintaining the Royal Road was no small task. It was like the empire's very own infrastructural teeth-whitening treatment, expensive but essential for keeping everything looking good. The road was littered with relay stations every 15 miles or so, where fresh horses and riders were always at the ready. It was like a relay race on steroids, or the world's first pit stop, depending on your level of ancient history geekiness. But let's not forget the real heroes of this tale, the administrators. These folks were the unsung champions of the Achaemenid Empire, the ones who turned the wheels of bureaucracy. Their job was to keep track of taxes, a task about as popular then as it is today. The empire was divided into 20 satrapies, each with its own tax obligations meticulously recorded on clay tablets. Some taxes were paid in silver, others in kind, like grain, livestock, or those fancy textiles you could only get in the bazaars of Persepolis. Taxes in the Achaemenid Empire were a brilliant mix of equal opportunity and crushing weight. Everyone had their skin in the game, from the wealthiest merchants to the humblest farmers. And while that might sound like a fair system, remember, fair doesn't always mean fun. To put it into perspective, if you were a satrap in charge of a territory like Babylonia, you might be expected to cough up to 1,000 talents of silver annually. In today's terms, that's around 25 tons of silver, enough to make a dragon's hoard look like pocket change. The king, of course, had his own set of challenges. While he was rolling in silver, his real wealth was in the empire's agriculture. The Persian king relied heavily on the fertile lands along the Tigris and Euphrates, and the Nile in Egypt to keep the empire's granaries stocked. The produce from these bread baskets was used not only to feed the population, but to sustain the army, a constant reminder that an empire marches on its stomach. Speaking of military might, let's bust a few myths about the so-called invincibility of the Persian army while we're at it. Sure, they were formidable, but like any military, they had their off days. The empire's might was not just in sheer numbers, but in the diversity of their forces. Troops were drawn from across the empire's vast territories, each bringing their own unique fighting styles and weapons to the table. It was less a homogeneous army, and more a patchwork quilt of military units, each one adding its own flair to the mix. Yet despite these impressive feats of administration, the empire was constantly on the brink of chaos. The satraps, those pesky middle managers, were always a potential source of trouble. Their loyalty was often as dependable as a cat's attention span. The king had to use a delicate blend of carrot and stick to keep them in line, lavishing them with gifts one moment and sending spies to keep an eye on them the next. It was the ancient version of trust, but verify, with a side of paranoia. But let's not be too hard on our Persian pals. After all, they managed to keep this colossal empire running smoothly for over 2 centuries. They were the original pioneers of the multinational corporation, integrating a vast array of cultures and economies into a single, functioning entity. It's a testament to the power of administration, proving that sometimes the pen really is mightier than the sword. As we wrap up this part of the tale, let's give a nod to the complexity and brilliance of the Achaemenid bureaucracy. It was a machine that, despite its flaws, managed to keep one of history's greatest empires ticking along. And isn't that the real lesson here? That even in the ancient world, it was the humdrum details, the drudgery of administration, and the persistence of a well-maintained road that kept the mighty Achaemenid empire from crumbling like a poorly baked pastry. So next time you find yourself grumbling over taxes or cursing a traffic jam, spare a thought for those ancient Persians. They were dealing with the same headaches, just without the luxury of air conditioning or podcasts to ease the pain. Speaking of headaches, let's dive into the colorful tapestry of the Achaemenid Empire's cultural scene, a kaleidoscope of languages, traditions, and the occasional disagreement over who brought the best hummus to the feast. Picture this. At its peak, the empire was home to over 70 distinct ethnic groups, each with their own customs, dialects, and let's be honest, their own version of the best way to do things. This was less a melting pot and more a cultural stew, where flavors were distinct but somehow managed to simmer together without boiling over into chaos. Now, you might think that such diversity would lead to a constant game of cultural tug-of-war, and it did to some extent. But the Achaemenids, ever the savvy managers, had a few tricks up their sleeves to keep the peace. For starters, they adopted an official policy of tolerance, which in the ancient world was as rare as a unicorn at a horse race. The empire's rulers allowed conquered peoples to maintain their local traditions, religions, and languages. This wasn't just altruism, it was a pragmatic move to prevent rebellion. After all, a happy populace is less likely to sharpen their pitchforks and more likely to keep paying taxes. But let's not get too carried away with the warm and fuzzy image of a multicultural utopia. The Achaemenid approach to diversity was a bit like that of a parent with too many kids, patient most days, but ready to lay down the law when things got out of hand. The empire's tolerance had its limits, and when those limits were tested, the response could be swift and severe. Case in point, the Ionian Revolt of 499 BCE, when Greek city-states on the western fringes of the empire decided they'd had enough of Persian rule. Their rebellion was met with a not-so-gentle reminder of who was boss, courtesy of Darius, his military forces. But back to the lighter side of cultural exchanges. The Achaemenid Empire was like a bustling ancient trade fair, with the Silk Road acting as its main street. This network of trade routes facilitated not just the exchange of goods, but of ideas, technology, and even culinary delights. Ever wondered where your favorite spices came from? Chances are, they were once transported along these routes, adding a pinch of flavor to dishes from Egypt to India. It's said that the Persians were particularly fond of a dish that was an early precursor to ice cream. Frozen rose water and vermicelli, anyone. Communication within this multicultural empire was its own kind of marvel. The Persians were linguistic jugglers, with Aramaic serving as the imperial lingua franca. It was the ancient world's equivalent of English today, a practical choice to facilitate trade and governance. Meanwhile, royal decrees were often written in 3 languages, Old Persian, Elamite, and Akkadian, ensuring that no one could claim they missed the memo. Think of it as the ultimate ancient group chat, with Darius I as the admin who occasionally had to mute the conversation when things got too heated. And let's not overlook the role of religion in this cultural mosaic. The Achaemenids practiced Zoroastrianism, a faith that emphasized the cosmic battle between good and evil. This dualistic worldview provided a handy framework for governing such a diverse empire. It was a bit like having a universal remote for moral guidance, simple, effective, and applicable to a wide range of cultural settings. Interestingly, the Achaemenid kings portrayed themselves as champions of order and justice, aligning themselves with Ahura Mazda, the Zoroastrian god of light. Whether this was a genuine spiritual belief or a clever PR move is up for debate, but it worked like a charm in keeping the empire's subjects aligned, at least spiritually. But let's address the elephant in the room, cultural misunderstandings. For all their efforts at tolerance, the Achaemenids weren't immune to the occasional diplomatic faux pas. Take the story of Cambyses Roman II, son of Cyrus the Great, who reportedly made a royal mess of his conquest of Egypt. According to Herodotus, Cambyses was less than respectful of Egyptian customs, famously marking the sacred appeased bull. Whether this actually happened or Herodotus was just having a go remains uncertain, but it illustrates the potential for cultural blunders even among seasoned conquerors. The Achaemenid Empire, with all its diversity, was a reminder that managing a multicultural society is a bit like herding cats, challenging, but not impossible with the right mix of patience, pragmatism, and the occasional firm hand. It's a testament to the empire's administrative acumen that they managed to balance these competing interests for so long. The empire's policies were a blend of carrot and stick, offering autonomy and respect while maintaining a tight grip on power. It's a delicate dance, one that modern leaders still struggle to master. So, as we ponder the complexities of Achaemenid governance, let's appreciate the historical irony. A vast empire held together not just by military might, but by the subtle art of diplomacy and cultural exchange. It's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful weapon in an empire's arsenal isn't a sword or a chariot, but the ability to understand and respect the diverse peoples within its borders. And while the Achaemenids may not have always got it right, their efforts were a significant step forward in the grand narrative of human civilization. But don't go thinking that the Achaemenids were all about peace and love. When it came to expansion, they were as ambitious as any empire, eagerly eyeing new territories like a shopper on Black Friday. Their campaigns stretched into the Balkans, reaching as far as Thrace, and even into the wilds of Scythia. These conquests brought in new peoples and cultures, adding layers to the empire's already rich tapestry. Yet, with every new acquisition came new challenges, and the balancing act of governance became ever more precarious. In this vast sea of cultures and languages, the Achaemenid Empire stood as a beacon of what was possible when tolerance and pragmatism were given their due. It's a lesson in history that resonates even today, a reminder that diversity can be a strength, but only if managed with care and respect. As we prepare to delve further into the intriguing saga of the Achaemenids, let's keep in mind the delicate equilibrium they maintained, a balancing act that was as impressive as it was fragile. And with that, we find ourselves at a crossroads in this historical journey, eager to explore the next chapter in the story of one of history's most fascinating empires. But don't worry, there's plenty more to come, because just like any good series, the best is yet to unfold. Stay tuned for more intrigue, more adventure, and perhaps a few more ancient culinary recipes that might just surprise your taste buds as we pivot from the cultural kaleidoscope of the Achaemenid Empire to the nitty-gritty of its economy. Let's dive into the ancient version of Show Me the Money. Spoiler alert, no NFTs here, just good old-fashioned coinage, trade routes, and agriculture that would make even the most seasoned investors head spin. At the heart of it all was a surprisingly sophisticated economy, humming along like a well-tuned chariot, albeit with fewer potholes than your average city commute. First things first, Let's talk moolah, or as the ancient Persians called it, the derrick. This was the empire's gold standard, literally. Named after Darius I, the derrick was a gold coin weighing in at about 4 grams. Think of it as the Bitcoin of its day, only more tangible and less volatile. With the derrick, the Persians pulled off the neat trick of standardizing currency across their vast territories, making trade as smooth as a Persian rug. But don't get too starry-eyed. This wasn't monopoly money. Each derrick was backed by the empire's wealth in precious metals, mined from places like Lydia and beyond. But gold wasn't the only game in town. Enter the silver siglos, the derrick's less glamorous but equally important sibling. Weighing around 6 grams, the siglos was the everyday coin, handling the bread and butter transactions, while the derrick dazzled in more prestigious dealings. It was like having a wallet full of 20s and a few $100 bills for special occasions. This two-tiered system was the backbone of the empire's economy, enabling trade across the sprawling Persian landscape. Speaking of trade, the Achaemenid Empire was the original hotspot of international commerce. Picture a bustling network of trade routes crisscrossing the empire like a spider's web, with the royal road as the shimmering thread down the middle. This ancient highway wasn't just about dispatching royal decrees. It was a superhighway for merchants and their goods, from the finest silk of China to the aromatic spices of India. It was the ancient world's answer to Amazon, minus the drones, but with a whole lot more camels. Now, let's not forget the logistical nightmare of running such an operation. The empire's administrators were the unsung heroes here, managing everything from tolls to trading permits with the finesse of a juggler on a unicycle. They ensured that goods flowed smoothly through the empire, all while keeping an eye out for the occasional bandit or disgruntled satrap thinking of skimming off the top. It was a delicate balance, like trying to keep a house of cards standing in a wind tunnel. And then there was agriculture, the not-so-secret source that kept the Achaemenid economy thriving. The fertile lands of Mesopotamia and the Nile Delta were the empire's breadbaskets, churning out grain, barley, and other staples like an ancient factory floor. These regions were more than just productive. They were critical to the empire's very survival. The produce wasn't just for filling stomachs. It was the fuel that powered the vast Achaemenid army, a reminder that an empire is only as strong as its next meal. Let's bust a few myths while we're at it. The romantic image of Persian agrarian life as pastoral bliss is about as accurate as a weather forecast for next year's Super Bowl. Farming was back-breaking work, and the farmers were often teetering on the brink of poverty. Taxes were a constant burden, and crop failures could spell disaster for entire communities. It was less Little House on the Prairie and more Survivor, ancient Persia, a relentless battle against the elements and imperial tax collectors alike. And then there were the trade guilds, the ancient world's answer to modern-day unions. These groups of artisans, merchants, and craftsmen were the economic engine of the empire, keeping the wheels of commerce turning with their skills and wares. They wielded considerable influence, not just in the marketplace, but also in the corridors of power, lobbying satraps for favorable policies and occasionally stirring the pot when times got tough. It was a dynamic relationship, a mix of cooperation and competition that kept the empire's economy vibrant and at times volatile. The Achaemenid economy was a marvel of ancient engineering, a complex machine that balanced the needs of a vast, diverse population with the ambitions of a sprawling empire. It was a testament to the administrative genius of the Persians, who managed to keep this intricate system running smoothly for centuries. Of course, it wasn't without its flaws. Inflation, corruption, and the occasional economic crisis were as much a part of ancient Persian life as they are today. But despite these challenges, the economy was the glue that held the Achaemenid Empire together, a reminder that even in ancient times, money talks, and sometimes it shouts. So, as we wrap up our whirlwind tour of the Achaemenid economy, let's acknowledge the empire's remarkable achievements. From the clink of coins to the rustle of trade caravans, the economy was a living, breathing entity, adapting to the ever-changing needs of its people and the whims of its rulers. It was a testament to the power of human ingenuity and the enduring strength of a well-managed system. And as we prepare to delve into the next chapter of this fascinating tale, let's remember that while the empire's economy may have been ancient, its lessons are as relevant today as they were millennia ago. Stay tuned for more adventures in the world of the Achaemenid Empire, where history and modernity collide in a spectacular dance of power, politics, and prosperity. And here we are, at the cliff's edge of the Achaemenid Empire's grand saga, peering into the abyss of its decline, a story as gripping as any ancient soap opera. So, was it really all Alexander the Great's fault that this massive empire crumbled? Or were there cracks in the foundation long before he played Demolition Man? Spoiler alert, it's a little from column A, a little from column B. But let's dig deeper, because understanding the fall of one of history's most formidable empires requires more than just pointing fingers at a Macedonian teenager with a penchant for conquest. First off, let's give Alexander some credit where it's due. His blitzkrieg through the Persian Empire was nothing short of legendary. With an army of just over 40,000, he managed to topple an empire that had stood for over 2 centuries. No small feat considering the Persians had an army that was, at least on paper, 5 times larger. But numbers alone don't win wars, and Alexander's strategic genius, combined with his ability to inspire loyalty among his troops, made him the nightmare of every Persian satrap, from the Hellespont to the Hindu Kush. However, blaming Alexander alone would be like blaming the iceberg for the Titanic sinking while ignoring the captain's questionable navigation skills. Long before Alexander's armies crossed the Hellespont, the Achaemenid Empire was already grappling with internal issues. Political instability was rife, with satraps, those ambitious regional governors, often playing their own game of thrones. Revolts were as frequent as a modern-day coffee run, with regions like Egypt and Babylon constantly testing the empire's patience and military resources. Financial strain was another Achilles' heel. Maintaining an empire that spanned 3 continents wasn't cheap. Those hefty tributes and taxes we talked about, they were starting to feel like squeezing water from a stone. And while coins like the Derrick and Siglos kept the economy ticking, inflation and corruption were gnawing away at the empire's coffers. The Persian treasury was more like a leaky bucket than an endless pool of riches, and by the time Alexander arrived, it was a bucket with more holes than a block of Swiss cheese. Moreover, the Achaemenid military, once the pride of the empire, had seen better days. It was less of a unified force, and more of a patchwork quilt of conscripts, many of whom were less than enthusiastic about marching into battle. The famed Immortals, the Empire's elite force, had by then become more legend than reality, more ceremonial guard than the unstoppable war machine they were once reputed to be. It's hard to fight off invaders when your best troops are more interested in guarding the palace gates than storming enemy lines. But let's not forget the role of leadership, or lack thereof. Darius Roman III, the last king of the Achaemenid Empire, might have been a decent ruler in more peaceful times, but against the onslaught of Alexander's forces, he was out of his depth. His attempts to rally the empire's forces were about as effective as using a sieve to hold water. At the Battle of Gorgamla in 331 BCE, he had every advantage on paper, superior numbers, familiar terrain, and a solid defensive position. Yet, Alexander's tactical brilliance turned what should have been a Persian victory into a catastrophic defeat. It was a classic case of brains over brawn, with Alexander playing chess while Darius struggled to keep up with checkers. As the empire crumbled under the weight of its own contradictions and external pressures, it's easy to see how the romantic allure of an all-powerful, invincible Persia was more myth than reality. The truth was far more complex, a tangled web of administrative genius and bureaucratic blunders, cultural integration and local resentment, economic prosperity and fiscal mismanagement. It's a reminder that even the mightiest of empires can be brought low by the most human of flaws, greed, ambition, and the relentless march of time. And yet, the legacy of the Achaemenid Empire lives on, echoing through the corridors of history in ways that are both profound and surprising. Its social structure, a masterclass in ancient governance, laid the groundwork for empires that followed, influencing everything from the Roman administrative system to the concept of federalism in modern nation-states. The idea of a centralized power delegating authority to regional governors lives on today, albeit with less bloodshed and more bureaucracy. Culturally, the Achaemenids were pioneers of tolerance and integration, proving that diverse peoples could coexist under a single banner, not through force alone, but through mutual respect and pragmatic governance. It's a lesson that resonates now more than ever, in a world as interconnected and culturally diverse as the Persian Empire at its zenith. And who could forget the royal road, that ancient artery of communication and commerce? It's a precursor to the modern infrastructure projects that keep our global economy humming and our inboxes flooded with shipping confirmations. So as we close the book on the Achaemenid Empire, let's take a moment to appreciate the sheer audacity of what they achieved. From the shadow of the Zagros Mountains to the banks of the Nile, they built an empire that was as much a marvel of human ingenuity as it was a cautionary tale of ambition and overreach. And while their empire may have crumbled, their innovations, ideas, and lessons endure, woven into the fabric of our own societies. In the end, the Achaemenid Empire was a complex tapestry, vibrant and flawed, a testament to the heights humanity can reach and the pitfalls that can bring it low. It's a reminder that history, with all its grandeur and tragedy, is never just a tale of victors and vanquished, but of the enduring spirit of human endeavor. So, let's raise a metaphorical glass to the Achaemenids, the overachieving cousins of the ancient world, whose legacy continues to shape our world in ways both seen and unseen. And remember, history doesn't always come with a spoiler alert, but it does come with lessons that are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. You find yourself in the rugged hills of medieval Scotland, where the air is as crisp as a freshly minted coin, and the customs are as intriguing as the landscape is wild. You're about to dive into the world of Scottish clans, a place where family ties were as tangled as the Highland thistles. Just when you thought the past couldn't surprise you, here comes handfasting, the medieval equivalent of trying before buying. Forget about swiping right or left. This was the era of trial marriages. Welcome to a time when love was as much about social strategy as it was about fluttering hearts. Now, let's talk about handfasting. This wasn't your average engagement. Imagine a young couple standing together with hands bound by a colorful cloth, publicly declaring their intention to be together for a year and a day. Yeah, you heard that right. A year and a day. This wasn't a lifetime commitment. It was more like a lease. If things didn't work out, they could part ways. It's like medieval insurance against a lifetime of marital regret. If only annulments today were that easy. But why, you might ask, would clans go through this whole rigmarole? It's all about the social ping-pong of alliances. In the medieval world, marriage was about as personal as a business merger. Clans needed to cement relationships, stabilize power, and ensure the flow of resources. The handfasting trial period allowed both parties to test the waters without jumping headfirst into the deep end. And let's not forget the dowry, the economic cherry on top of this medieval sundae. The bride's family would provide a dowry, which could include anything from livestock to land or even a strategic pile of silver coins. This wasn't just a thank you for marrying my daughter gift. It was a financial safety net, and sometimes a not-so-subtle hint about the bride's value. If you were wondering about the economics of love, well, here it is. Love was expensive, and marriages were investments. Let's sprinkle some numbers on this. A decent dowry could range from a couple of cows to several acres of prime Scottish land. Livestock was the medieval equivalent of a savings account, easily convertible and always in demand. And land, well, that was the ultimate investment. The more land a clan controlled, the more power they wielded. You see, in a world where kings could rise or fall based on a few thousand acres, every chunk of land mattered. Speaking of power, handfasting wasn't just about the happy couple. It was about the entire clan. You didn't just marry an individual, you married a network. The social dynamics were as complex as a medieval tapestry. A successful handfasting could forge alliances that strengthened the clan's influence. It was like medieval LinkedIn, except with more bagpipes and fewer endorsements. But don't get too misty-eyed here. While the romantic image of handfasting is all about love and partnership, the reality was sometimes more transactional. If things went south during the trial period, the couple could split without the messy entanglement of divorce. However, it's not like they just shook hands and parted ways. If children were involved, things got complicated. The clans had to decide who got custody, and yes, there were often disputes. It wasn't always amicable, but it was better than a lifetime of unhappiness. Despite its practicalities, handfasting had a certain allure. The idea of a trial marriage sounds oddly progressive, doesn't it? In a time when life was uncertain and often short, a little certainty about your romantic future must have been tempting. That's the romantic myth, anyway. But the reality, it was a blend of strategic alliances, economic calculations, and just a dash of genuine affection. Interestingly, even as handfasting faded from practice, it left a lasting legacy. The tradition of testing compatibility before tying the knot didn't quite die out. It morphed over the centuries, but the concept of understanding what you're getting into remained. And let's face it, we could all use a little more honesty in relationships, whether in the highlands of Scotland or the concrete jungles of today. So, there you have it. Handfasting, the original prenup, a medieval test drive for the brave-hearted and the economically savvy. It's a tradition that reflects the complexities of marriage, not just as a personal commitment, but as a social and economic strategy. Who knew that medieval Scotland could teach us so much about love, power, and the art of negotiation? Now, just when you thought medieval Scottish traditions couldn't get any more intriguing, we move from trial marriages to trial meals, or as they called it, clan feasting. Picture this, a gathering where the food is as abundant as the egos are massive. Welcome to the world of competitive hospitality, where throwing a feast was less about feeding your clan and more about flexing your culinary and economic muscles. Think of it as the medieval equivalent of a Michelin-starred potluck, but with a side of debt that could rival the national deficit. Let's start with the logistics. Hosting a feast was no small feat, no pun intended. It was a logistical nightmare that could give modern event planners sleepless nights. You weren't just cooking for a handful of friends. You were feeding an entire clan, and in some cases, neighboring ones too. Imagine preparing for a guest list that could easily top a few hundred, all expecting to leave with full bellies and possibly a few extra pounds. The amount of food required was staggering. We're talking about an entire herd of cattle, a flock of sheep, and enough ale to fill a small lake, all consumed in a single night. Now, why would anyone subject themselves to such an ordeal? Simple. In medieval Scotland, hospitality was an art form, a way to showcase your wealth and influence. The more lavish the feast, the more powerful you appeared. But here's the kicker. This display of munificence could bankrupt even the wealthiest laird. Hosting a feast was like running a small war, without the bloodshed, but with all the financial ruin. The costs could rival the dowry of a minor princess. A single feast could set you back the equivalent of several years' income, sometimes more if you wanted to impress the right people or outdo a rival clan. And let's talk about the ale. Scottish ale, a beverage so beloved that some clans were more famous for their brewing skills than their battle prowess. Brewing ale was a science and an art, and a well-brewed batch could elevate your status faster than a victorious raid. A clan with a reputation for excellent ale could attract allies more easily than one with a stockpile of swords. So, when it came to feasts, ensuring a steady flow of quality ale was non-negotiable. Running out mid-feast was a social faux pas equivalent to forgetting the bride at a wedding. But let's not romanticize this too much. While the idea of a grand feast sounds delightful, the reality was far from glamorous. Imagine the aftermath. Piles of bones, spilled ale, and the occasional brawl to settle old scores or ignite new ones. The cleanup was as daunting as the preparation, and often fell to the lower orders of the clan, who, let's be honest, probably didn't enjoy the festivities as much as their lairds. Despite the potential for financial collapse, feasting held a magnetic allure. It was a chance to forge alliances, showcase power, and sometimes just to revel in the sheer joy of excess. The romantic myth of the cheerful medieval banquet persists today, but peel back the layers, and you'll find a complex web of social maneuvering, economic calculation, and a touch of reckless abandon. Moreover, clans who excelled at these gatherings often found themselves with more than a few new friends the next day. Remember, in a world where your neighbors could be allies or enemies, making friends was as vital as sharpening your sword. If you could throw a feast that folks talked about for weeks, you were golden. It was like getting a 5-star review on medieval Yelp. Just don't expect any loyalty if your ale was subpar or your meat overcooked. So there you have it. Clan feasting in medieval Scotland, a gastronomic gauntlet where the stakes were as high as the heaping plates. It was a tradition that reflected both the grandeur and the grit of the time, a world where a meal could make or break a laird. And as much as we might chuckle at the absurdity of it all, there's a certain admiration for those who dared to turn a dinner party into an epic saga of culinary and social prowess. As we dive deeper into the world of Scottish clans, remember this: the past is a place where the line between legend and reality is as thin as a Highland mist. And while we love the tales of grand feasts and heroic deeds, the truth is often spiced with a generous pinch of human folly. Keep your senses sharp, and your sense of humor sharper. We're just getting started. Now that we've digested the culinary escapades of medieval Scotland, let's lace up our boots and head outdoors for an invigorating look at the Highland Games. If you're imagining a quaint sports festival with a touch of rustic charm, think again. These gatherings were less about casual athleticism and more about flexing those clan muscles, both literally and metaphorically. First up, caber tossing. Picture a telephone pole, about 20 feet long and weighing as much as a small horse. The goal: toss it end over end until it lands in a perfect 12 o'clock position. Sounds straightforward, right? But this isn't just about brute strength. It's an art form, a delicate balance between power and precision. And let's be honest, there's a certain appeal to hurling giant logs across the landscape. But why, you ask, would clans bother with such a spectacle? The reality is, caber tossing was less a fitness routine and more a peacock strut for the brawniest members of the clan. It was a chance to show off physical prowess and intimidate rivals. The bigger the caber you could toss, the bigger your reputation. It was like Scotland's Got Talent, but with fewer judges and more splinters. And while the image of burly Scotsmen tossing logs in kilts may have a romantic flair, the truth is, it was a strategic display of strength meant to deter aggression from neighboring clans. Because who wants to pick a fight with someone who can casually lob a tree trunk? Then there's stone lifting. If caber tossing is the headliner, stone lifting is the gritty opening act. Competitors would hoist stones ranging from 200 to 300 pounds, sometimes even heavier, onto platforms or over bars. This wasn't just a test of strength, it was a rite of passage. Young men proved their worth and earned their place in the clan hierarchy by showcasing their ability to lift these massive boulders. But let's get real. It was also an excellent way to size up potential warriors. In a world where physical strength could mean the difference between victory and defeat, having a clan full of stone lifters was like having your own personal army of human bulldozers. And here's the kicker. These games weren't just about showing off muscles. They were deeply intertwined with the economic and political landscapes of the time. Hosting the Highland Games was an opportunity to attract allies and showcase your clan's wealth and resources. They were a social and diplomatic event wrapped in a sporting guise. Picture a medieval networking event, complete with competitive activities and a side of strategic alliance building. Let's dive into the economic angle. Running these games wasn't a cheap endeavor. The cost of organizing them could rival that of a lavish feast. You needed food, drink, and accommodations for all the visiting clans, not to mention the prizes for the winners, which could range from livestock to precious metals. It was an investment, with the hope of reaping political and social dividends. A successful Highland Games could solidify alliances, deter potential aggressors, and even attract new members to the clan. However, the games also had a darker side. Beneath the surface of camaraderie and competition lay a simmering tension. Rivalries could quickly escalate into violence, turning a friendly gathering into a battlefield. The games were a pressure cooker of egos and ambitions, where one wrong move could spark a feud that lasted generations. It's a reminder that while we might romanticize these events today, they were rooted in a harsh reality where survival often hinged on strength and cunning. Despite this, the legend of the Highland Games persists, fueled by tales of heroic feats and legendary athletes. But as with most myths, the truth is a complex tapestry woven with threads of both valor and vanity. The games were as much about spectacle and strategy as they were about athletic achievement. They were a microcosm of the societal and political dynamics of medieval Scotland, where every toss and lift carried weight far beyond the field. As you ponder the spectacle of the Highland Games, remember this. They were a stage where clans played out their ambitions, where physical prowess met political savvy, and where the line between sport and survival was as thin as a Highland mist. It's a world where reality blends with romantic myth, each enhancing the other in a dance as intricate as the games themselves. And while we've only begun to scratch the surface, there's much more to explore in this fascinating saga of strength and strategy. So stay tuned, because the story of medieval Scotland's clans is far from over. And just when you thought the Highland Games were the pinnacle of clan theatrics, along comes the real heavyweight title bout of medieval Scotland: clan rivalries. Strap in, because this is where the drama truly unfolds. Forget the friendly competition of tossing cabers. This was more akin to a Game of Thrones episode, but with less dragons and more tartan. Clan rivalries were the bread and butter of Scottish medieval life. Picture a world where your next-door neighbour wasn't just someone you borrowed a cup of sugar from. No, they were potentially your fiercest competitor, a constant reminder that trust was a luxury you couldn't afford. These weren't just petty squabbles over who had the nicest thatched roof. We're talking about conflicts that could last generations, evolving into full-blown feuds with body counts that would make a mafia boss blush. So how did these rivalries kick off? Sometimes it was a simple misunderstanding, like a boundary dispute or a stolen cow. Other times it was more complex, involving marriage alliances gone awry or debts unpaid. Whatever the spark, the resulting blaze was fueled by a potent mix of pride, honor, and the ever-present need for resources. Resources. The medieval equivalent of Bitcoin, except in the form of land, cattle, and manpower. Speaking of manpower, let's get into the economics of keeping a standing army of kilted warriors. If you think hiring a personal trainer is expensive, try maintaining a fighting force ready to rumble at the drop of a sporran. Clans needed warriors, and warriors needed to eat live and occasionally be paid. The cost of outfitting these men wasn't just a matter of handing out swords and shields. We're talking about an economy that revolved around war, where the price of arming and feeding your clan could take a serious bite out of your coffers. A single battle could cost a clan the equivalent of a small fortune. Picture this. Feeding 100 warriors for a week might set you back a few dozen head of cattle, plus the ale to keep morale high. Weapons weren't cheap either. A decent sword could cost more than a common labourer's yearly income. And don't forget the armour, unless you fancied charging into battle in nothing but a tunic and a prayer. The reality was, sustaining a standing army was a constant drain on resources, a balancing act of economics and survival. But why go through all this trouble? The harsh truth: if you didn't have a standing army, you were vulnerable. Vulnerable to raids, vulnerable to your rivals, vulnerable to the whims of a world where might often made right. In medieval Scotland, power was the ultimate currency, and a well-armed clan was a force to be reckoned with. Now, let's weave in the tartan, a symbol that's come to embody Scottish identity, but was once as much a marker of danger as of pride. These colourful patterns were more than just fashion statements. They were badges of identity, instantly recognisable on the battlefield. Each clan had its own distinct tartan, a fabric woven with threads of history, allegiance, and yes, rivalry. The romantic image of the tartan-clad warrior is one we love to hold on to, but the reality was more perilous. Wearing your clan's tartan was akin to sporting gang colours. A misstep into the wrong territory could turn a leisurely stroll into a life-or-death sprint. The tartan was a flag that declared your allegiance and warned others of your presence. It was both a symbol of unity within the clan and a stark reminder of the divisions between them. And let's not forget the economic aspect of tartans. Producing these fabrics required resources, dye from rare plants, skilled weavers to create intricate patterns, and trade networks to acquire the necessary materials. A well-crafted tartan was a display of wealth and sophistication, a testament to a clan's ability to harness both nature and artistry. Yet, amidst all this rivalry, there was a bizarre sort of equilibrium. These conflicts, while destructive, also acted as a twisted form of population control and resource management. A successful raid could replenish a clan's stock of cattle or expand its territory. It was a brutal arithmetic where the cost of warfare had to be weighed against the potential gains. In this light, clan rivalries were a complex dance of economics, politics, and survival. They were the ultimate expression of medieval realpolitik, where strength was respected and weakness exploited. The romanticized image of noble warriors clashing in defense of honor masks the gritty reality of a world where every decision was a gamble, and every battle a roll of the dice. So, as you ponder the tartan's threads and the warriors who darned them. Remember this. Beneath the colorful patterns lies a story of cunning and conflict, where every stitch tells a tale of power struggles and survival instincts. The past, with its blend of legend and reality, offers lessons that resonate even today. And while we've only just begun to unravel this tapestry, the saga of Scotland's clans is far from over. Stay tuned as we continue to explore the intersections of history, myth, and the enduring human spirit in the next part of our journey. But let's not get too misty-eyed about the romance of tartans and clan rivalries. It's time to talk legacy, people. How do these medieval traditions echo through the cobblestone corridors of modern Scotland? Well, grab your bagpipes and brace yourself for a whirlwind tour of historical impact, where myth and reality do a dizzying dance worthy of Achaemenid. First off, let's tackle those Highland games. While today they're a charming spectacle of athleticism and culture, back in the day, they were less about fun and more about flexing your clan's brawny biceps. Yet somehow, these games have survived the centuries, morphing into a celebration of Scottish heritage with a global fan base. From the small village of Bremer to far-flung places like New York and Tokyo, people gather to hurl stones and toss cabers, channeling their inner medieval strongmen. It's as if the world's decided that nothing says cultural appreciation quite like launching a tree trunk across a field. Despite the modern-day joviality, the undercurrent of competition still lingers, though thankfully the stakes are now more about pride than land disputes. And what about the iconic tartan, you ask? The plaid patterns that have become synonymous with Scottish identity. Once markers of clan allegiance, they've been appropriated by fashion houses and catwalks from Milan to Manhattan. Today, tartan is more about style than survival, a romantic nod to Scotland's storied past. Yet each pattern still whispers tales of old rivalries and alliances, a reminder that beneath the fashion lies a history steeped in blood, sweat, and a fair amount of sheep farming. Now, let's address the elephant in the room, or rather, the trial marriage in the field. Hand-fasting, that medieval test drive of matrimony, is experiencing a curious revival. Modern couples, drawn by its romantic allure, are opting for hand-fasting ceremonies as a nod to tradition with a twist of rebellion against conventional nuptials. It's like the ultimate prenup, without the lawyers. Yet, while the image of two lovers bound by a colorful cloth is enchanting, it's essential to remember that, historically, this practice was as much about strategic alliances and economic stability as it was about love. Still, the idea of testing compatibility before committing has struck a chord, proving that even the medieval Scots were ahead of their time in certain respects. What about those legendary clan feasts? While you might not see lairds bankrupting themselves to host a medieval potluck today, the spirit of Scottish hospitality remains vibrant. Modern gatherings may not require entire herds of cattle, but the emphasis on community and shared meals persists. Whether it's a Burns supper or a family gathering, the Scots have turned feasting into an art form. The echoes of competitive hospitality may be muted, but the essence of camaraderie and generosity continues to flavor the social landscape. Now, let's address the romanticized image of the Scottish warrior, tartan-clad and ready for battle. Today, this image has been co-opted by popular culture, from Hollywood blockbusters to tourist brochures. But while we love the idea of noble warriors fighting for honor and glory, the truth was often more about survival than heroics. The romantic myth has overshadowed the gritty reality, where power dynamics and resource struggles dictated life more than chivalric ideals. Yet, this myth remains potent, a testament to the enduring allure of Scotland's rugged past. So, what's the takeaway from all this historical hoopla? It's simple. Scotland's past is a rich tapestry of tradition and transformation, where the line between legend and reality is as blurred as a misty Highland morning. The customs of medieval clans have left an indelible mark on Scottish culture, shaping everything from national identity to tourism. Yet, as we celebrate the romance of these traditions, it's crucial to remember the harsh realities that underpin them. The legacy of medieval Scotland is a complex mix of nostalgia and pragmatism, where the past informs the present in unexpected ways. In the end, the story of Scotland's clans is a testament to the resilience of human culture. It's a reminder that while myths may captivate our imaginations, the reality often offers deeper insights into the human condition. As we explore the quirks and customs of centuries past, let's embrace the lessons they offer, knowing that history is not just a series of events, but a continuous dialogue between then and now. So, whether you're tossing a caber, darning a tartan, or simply enjoying a dram of whiskey by a crackling fire, remember the rich tapestry of history that brought you there. The journey from medieval Scotland to modern times is a wild one, full of twists, turns, and tales that continue to shape the world we live in. And as you ponder the legacy of these strange traditions, take a moment to appreciate the humor, the hardship, and the humanity that connect us all through the ages. In the end, Scotland's history is a love letter to the past, written in the ink of human experience. It's a saga of survival and spirit, where the echoes of ancient customs resonate with the rhythms of contemporary life. So go ahead, revel in the romance, marvel at the myths, but never forget the reality that made it all possible. Here's to the clans, the customs, and the culture that continue to captivate us, one Highland adventure at a time. Slant M. Hath. In ancient Greece, where the guards played a more active role than any modern-day celebrity, their architectural inventions were nothing short of a headliner event. The Greeks had a knack for turning even the simplest column into a drama queen, complete with its own story arc. Let's start with the basics, the Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian orders. If these sound like fancy coffee flavors or pretentious baby names, you're not entirely wrong. These three styles were as distinct as the Kardashians, each with its own flair and followers. The Doric order was like the blue jeans of ancient architecture, functional, no nonsense, and it got the job done without any frills. The Greeks started using this style around 600 BCE, and it was the architectural equivalent of a good, sturdy handshake. No fancy bases, just a plain shaft topped with a simple capital. Think of it as the architectural version of a minimalist Instagram feed. It was particularly popular on the mainland and in colonies in southern Italy, where it suited the rugged landscapes and straightforward sensibilities. Next up, the Ionic order, which began to make waves around 600 BCE as well. If Doric was the strong, silent type, Ionic was its more refined cousin who'd spent a year abroad and come back with fancy new ideas. The Ionic columns were slimmer and more elegant, with scroll-like capitals known as volutes. They hailed mainly from the Ionian coast, hence the name, and were the architectural equivalent of a debonair gentleman with a penchant for philosophy and a taste for the finer things in life. And then there's the Corinthian order, the youngest sibling of the trio, making its first appearance around the 5th century BCE. Imagine Ionic, but with a little more drama and extra flair. The Corinthian style was the peacock of ancient columns, tall, slender, and topped with an ornate capital of acanthus leaves. It was the kind of column that demanded attention, the architectural equivalent of showing up to a toga party in a custom designer outfit. This order saw more use by the Romans later on, but it was the Greeks who planted the seed of its ornate beauty. Now, you might be wondering why these ancient Greeks would go to such lengths to build massive stone structures without so much as a power drill or crane to help them. It's a bit like deciding to run a marathon in flip-flops just because you can. But there was method to their madness. These architectural feats were not just about aesthetics. They were grand statements of power and wealth. Constructing a temple wasn't just about pleasing the gods. It was a political move, a way to flex the city-state's muscles and show off economic prowess. Look at us, they'd say. Not only are we pious and cultured, but we've got the resources and manpower to make Mount Olympus jealous. Temple building was the ancient equivalent of building a new sports stadium or a flashy skyscraper today. It created jobs, stimulated the economy, and attracted visitors and pilgrims, which in turn brought in more money. In fact, this was one of the earliest forms of build it, and they will come. The Parthenon, for instance, wasn't just a temple, it was an economic powerhouse. Built between 447 and 432 BCE, it cost the equivalent of 469 silver talents, or about 7 million euros in today's money. That's a lot of drachmas. Politically, these structures served as the physical manifestation of the city-state's dominance. Athens, in particular, was keen to showcase its superiority. Pericles, the Athenian statesman, spearheaded the construction of the Parthenon as part of his grand vision to make Athens the cultural and political heart of the Greek world. It was a move to assert Athenian supremacy, a colossal middle finger to rival city-states like Sparta. And the message was clear. We're not just talking the talk, we're walking the walk and doing it in style. Of course, the Greeks didn't just wing it when it came to construction. These projects required careful planning and a deep understanding of geometry and physics. They were the original HGTV stars, long before Joanna Gaines was flipping farmhouses and making shiplap a household name. Ancient Greek architects like Eccentric and Callicrates, who worked on the Parthenon, were the rock stars of their day, their names etched in history for their architectural genius. So, next time you look at a Greek column, remember that it's not just a stone cylinder holding up a roof. It's a piece of history, a testament to human ingenuity, ambition, and a little bit of audacity. The Greeks didn't just build temples, they crafted legacies, one stone block at a time. And while we might marvel at their ability to create such beauty without modern technology, let's not forget the real reason behind these stone giants: power, politics, and a healthy dose of showing off. So, let's dive into the Parthenon, the bay and say of Greek temples, and why it deserves that diva status. Built between 447 and 432 BCE, it was a dazzling display of architectural mastery and political swagger. You see, this wasn't just a temple dedicated to Athena, the goddess of wisdom and war. No, it was the ancient equivalent of a blockbuster movie premiere, complete with red carpets and paparazzi. Funded by the Delian League, which was basically Athens' personal piggy bank disguised as a mutual defense alliance, the Parthenon cost a staggering 469 silver talents. If you're wondering what that means, think about 7 million euros in today's cash, or roughly the GDP of a small island nation. The Delian League was initially formed to fend off Persian aggression, but surprise, Athens decided it was a great excuse to funnel money into their own extravagant projects, like the Parthenon. Picture Pericles, the Athenian statesman, as the ultimate project manager who convinced everyone that building the Parthenon was crucial for their defense. In reality, it was more about flexing Athens' cultural and economic muscles. It was the most majestic "look at me now" moment in ancient history. Enter Phidias, the superstar artist and sculptor, the Michelangelo before Michelangelo was a thing. He was the creative genius behind the Parthenon's artistic innovations, including the massive statue of Athena Parthenos that stood inside. This statue was a whopping 12 meters tall and made of gold and ivory, a material combo that screamed, "I cost more than your whole city's annual budget." Phidias was the guy who could make marble sing. He and his team of artisans didn't just create statues, they crafted stories in stone, packed with emotion and movement. Now, the Parthenon might look like a pristine example of Greek perfection, but let's debunk that myth right here and now. Behind every gleaming column was a crew of sweaty, hard-working stonemasons and laborers, chiseling away in the blistering Mediterranean sun. Forget the romantic image of toga-clad philosophers pondering life's mysteries. This was back-breaking labor, folks. Picture hundreds of workers hauling massive marble blocks from the quarries of Mount Pentelicus, located about 16 kilometers away. There were no cranes or bulldozers, just sheer human grit and ingenuity. It was a construction site that would make even the most seasoned foreman break into a cold sweat. But why all the fuss about artistic innovations, you ask? Well, the Parthenon was a masterclass in optical illusions. To the naked eye, the columns appear straight and evenly spaced, but they're actually slightly curved and lean inward. This architectural sleight of hand was designed to counteract optical distortions and create the illusion of perfect symmetry. It's like the ancient Greeks said, why settle for a good selfie when you can have a masterpiece? The result was a building that looked like it was touched by the gods themselves, even if it took a small army of workers to achieve that divine look. Let's not forget that the Parthenon was also a piece of political propaganda, a marble megaphone declaring Athens' dominance over the Greek world. The temple's sculptural decorations depicted scenes of Athenian triumphs and mythological battles, subtly reminding everyone who the big dog in the Greek kennel was. This was Athens' way of saying, not only are we culturally superior, but we're also the baddest warriors in the room. It was a message that resonated loud and clear across the city-states, like a well-timed mic drop. So, while the Parthenon stands as a testament to Greek artistic and engineering prowess, it's also a monument to the messy, gritty reality of ancient construction and political maneuvering. It's a reminder that behind every great achievement there's a trail of sweat, ambition, and a fair bit of cunning. As we marvel at its beauty today, let's give a nod to the unsung heroes who toiled away in obscurity to create this wonder. The Parthenon isn't just a relic of the past. It's a reflection of the timeless human drive to build, to conquer, and yes, to show off just a little bit. Now that we've marveled at the Parthenon's architectural swagger and construction grit, let's shift gears to the city that cradled such grandeur, Athens. If you're envisioning a city planned with the precision of a Swiss watch, think again. Athens was more like the messy desk of a creative genius. It worked, but not always in the way you'd expect. Urban planning, more like urban improvisation, where streets twisted and turned with the whimsy of a jazz soloist. It was a city that grew organically, shaped by the daily hustle of its citizens and the dictates of the land. Picture Athens not as a grid, but as a patchwork quilt of narrow alleyways and bustling marketplaces. The Agora was the beating heart of this Athenian sprawl, a social and economic hub where democracy itself was practically invented over a loaf of bread and a jug of wine. Forget the pristine white marble fantasy. The Agora was more like a chaotic bazaar, buzzing with philosophers, merchants, and curious passers-by. Socrates might not have had a cappuccino in hand, but he surely exchanged ideas over a cup of watered-down wine. It was here that democracy came alive, not in grandiose speeches, but in the everyday chatter of citizens. Economically, the Agora was the Wall Street of its day, minus the skyscrapers and digital tickers, of course. Instead, stalls hawked everything from olive oil to pottery, while traders shouted prices louder than New York's stockbroker. The Agora was a marketplace where you could buy a goat, debate philosophy, and get a haircut, all in one afternoon. It was capitalism in a tunic, where the economic and social fabric of Athens was woven together, one transaction at a time. But why did Athenians prefer to walk everywhere? Simply put, they had no choice. Athens wasn't exactly chariot-friendly, and with streets narrower than a catwalk model, walking was the only viable option. The city's layout was dictated less by grand design and more by the pragmatic needs of its people. Distances were short, and everything of importance, from the Agora to the Acropolis, was within a stroll's reach. In a city dominated by foot traffic, the ancient Athenians would have scoffed at the idea of hailing a ride. Their calves were their ubas, and sandals their tires. Now, let's address the myth of ancient cities as utopias of marble and leisure. Sure, we've all seen majestic ruins bathed in golden sunlight, but the truth is, Athens was as gritty as any modern metropolis. Behind the facade of temples and public buildings were crowded residential quarters, where space was at a premium and sanitation was more of a hope than a reality. Think of it as the ancient version of a bustling urban jungle, where the smell of olive oil mingled with less pleasant aromas. Politically, the city's layout was a reflection of its democratic ideals. Unlike the rigid hierarchies of other ancient cultures, Athens' urban sprawl mirrored its egalitarian ethos. The lack of a central, authoritarian plan gave rise to a city where citizens had a voice, sometimes literally, as they made their way through the crowded streets to the Pnyx, the assembly hill where decisions were made. It was democracy in action, where the clamor of the streets translated into the clamor of debate. Yet, Athens wasn't all about lofty ideals and intellectual pursuits. The city's design was also a testament to its pragmatic side. Water supply was a constant concern, and the Athenians developed intricate systems to bring water from distant sources. The Pisistrated aqueduct, for instance, was a marvel of engineering, channeling precious water into the city, proving that even in ancient times, necessity was the mother of invention. While the aesthetics of Athens might have been a delightful mess, the city was a reflection of its people, dynamic, inventive, and a little rough around the edges. The Athenians were builders of ideas, as much as they were builders of stone. This was a city that thrived on contrast, where the grandeur of the Acropolis stood side by side with the vibrant chaos of the Agora. It was a place where philosophy and commerce walked hand in hand, and where the lines between the sacred and the mundane blurred like a sunset over the Aegean. So, when you think of ancient Athens, don't just picture the white marble temples and serene philosophers. Picture the noise, the smells, and the vibrant life that pulsed through its streets. It was a city that lived and breathed, a testament to human ingenuity and the messy beauty of urban life. Athens was less about perfection and more about possibility, a reminder that sometimes the best plans are those we don't plan at all. While Athens was busy being the ancient world's Silicon Valley of ideas, let's harp on the metaphorical chariot and head over to some lesser-known but equally fascinating locales, Epidaurus and Olympia. These places were where architecture didn't just meet the eye, but also the ear and the competitive spirit. First stop, Epidaurus. If Athens was the philosophical TED talk of the Greek world, Epidaurus was its Broadway. Nestled in the northeastern Peloponnese, this site is famous for its theatre, an architectural marvel that could make even the most seasoned acoustical engineer weep with envy. The theatre was built in the 4th century BCE and boasted a seating capacity of about 14,000. Give or take a few togas. It wasn't just a place to catch the latest Greek tragedy. It was an immersive experience where every whisper from the stage could be heard at the top row, some 55 meters away. That's right, not a single "what did he say" from the audience. So how did they do it? Magic? Divine intervention? No, just some good old-fashioned geometry and physics. The Greeks arranged the seats in a semicircle, creating a natural amplifier. The limestone rows absorbed low-frequency sounds and reflected high-frequency ones, ensuring that even the guards would have no trouble hearing the actors. It's like they had their own ancient version of Dolby surround sound, minus the popcorn. And let's not forget the cultural significance of such a place. The theatre wasn't just about entertainment. It was a communal gathering spot, a place for citizens to engage with stories that reflected and questioned societal norms. It was where the community came to experience catharsis, a collective emotional release that was as necessary as it was powerful. In a way, it was the ancient Greek version of a group therapy session, but with more drama and less talk of inner child work. Now, let's sprint over to Olympia, home of the original Olympics. If Epidaurus was about the mind and spirit, Olympia was all about the body and competition. Every 4 years, this site turned into the athletic mecca of the ancient world, a place where athletes from across the Greek city-states gathered to show off their physical prowess. The Olympics were as much about politics as they were about sports. Winning wasn't just personal glory, it was national pride. The scale of the buildings at Olympia was as grand as the games themselves. The Temple of Zeus, completed around 456 BCE, was a colossal structure that housed a statue of the god himself, crafted by Phidias. Yes, the same creative genius behind the Parthenon's Athena. This statue of Zeus was one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world, standing at about 12 meters tall and made of ivory and gold. It was a clear message to visitors. The Greeks didn't just play games, they revered them. Transporting materials to build such grand structures was no small feat. Imagine hauling marble blocks from quarries miles away without so much as a donkey-drawn GPS. These builders had to rely on their wits and a good sense of direction. Roads were rough, and logistics involved more than just a well-drawn map. Yet the Greeks managed it, proving that determination and a bit of ingenuity could move mountains, or at least sizable chunks of them. Culturally, Olympia served as the glue that held the Greek world together. In an era marked by city-state rivalries, the Olympics were a unifying force. They were a truce, a time when warfare paused, and the focus shifted to feats of strength and skill. It was a time when Greeks could see themselves not just as Athenians or Spartans, but as part of something larger. The Games were a reminder that despite political squabbles, there was a shared identity, a concept that resonates even today. Interestingly, these sites, both Epidaurus and Olympia, highlight the dual nature of Greek culture, the balance of mind and body, spirit and strength. While Epidaurus whispered tales of human drama to the heavens, Olympia cheered as muscles flexed and chariots raced. Both reflected the Greeks' understanding that life was more than just survival. It was about excellence in every form. Yet, let's bust a myth before we wrap up. These ancient sites weren't all glitz and glamour. Behind the pristine facades and legendary performances was a reality as gritty as any modern construction site. Workers toiled in harsh conditions, with little more than hand tools and muscle power. It was back-breaking labor, often under the watchful eyes of overseers who prioritized deadlines over comfort. Think less artistic endeavor and more sweat equity. As we marvel today at the acoustics of Epidaurus or the grandeur of Olympia, it's worth remembering that these wonders were born of both brilliance and brawn. The Greeks might have had the gods on their side, but it was human effort and ingenuity that truly built these legacies. And so, as we continue our journey through ancient Greece, let's keep an ear out for the stories these stones still tell, a blend of myth, reality, and everything in between. As we stand in awe of the ancient Greeks' architectural might, it's worth taking a step back and examining the ripple effect these stone giants had on the world stage. You see, when it comes to cultural appropriation, the Romans were the original copper-paste kings. They took Greek architecture and added their own flair, like a chef who couldn't resist adding extra garlic to an already perfect dish. The Romans didn't just borrow Greek styles, they unabashedly flaunted them. They were like kids in a candy store, grabbing Doric, Ionic, and Corinthian columns with reckless abandon. By the time they were done, the Roman Empire was peppered with structures that screamed Hellenic chic, from the grandiose Pantheon to the sprawling Colosseum. Sure, the Romans added vaults and domes, which the Greeks hadn't quite gotten around to, but the influence of Greek architecture was as clear as a Spartan's disdain for frills. And what about those Corinthian columns? You know, the ones that were like the peacocks of the architectural world. The Romans loved them so much they practically made them their mascot. Every self-respecting Roman building had to have a Corinthian column or two, or 100. The Romans took the Greek knack for architectural drama and turned it into an empire-wide soap opera of stone and mortar. Fast forward a few centuries, and we find ourselves in the throes of the Renaissance, where Europe rediscovered its classical roots, like a teenager unearthing their parents' record collection. Architects like Brunelleschi and Palladio looked to ancient Greece for inspiration, and boy, did they find it. The result, a revival of Greek styles that spread across Europe faster than you could say acanthus leaves. Suddenly, everyone wanted a piece of that ancient sophistication, from the grand cathedrals of Italy to the stately manors of England. But let's not get too misty-eyed over these architectural throwbacks. While the romantic allure of Greek architecture is undeniable, it was the engineering prowess that truly left its mark. Those ancient Greeks weren't just building temples to appease the gods. They were setting the foundations for future urban landscapes. The precision in their measurements, their understanding of load-bearing structures, and their innovative use of materials laid the groundwork for modern architecture. Today, you can still spot Greek influences in the most unexpected places. Stroll through Washington, D.C., and you'll notice neoclassical buildings that pay homage to those ancient architects. The Lincoln Memorial, with its Doric columns, is basically the Parthenon's American cousin. Even your local bank might sport a Greek column or two, a nod to the timeless association between classical architecture and stability, a comforting thought when you're depositing your paycheck. So, what is it about these ancient ruins that continue to captivate us? Sure, the myths of gods and heroes play a part, but let's not kid ourselves. It's the sheer audacity of their engineering that really steals the show. The Greeks were building structures that were meant to last, and last they did. These ruins are a testament to human ingenuity, a reminder that even without modern technology, people could create wonders that would stand the test of time. But here's a twist. As we look back on these ancient marvels, it's worth pondering what future generations will make of our architectural endeavors. Will they marvel at our glass skyscrapers and concrete jungles with the same admiration we have for ancient Greece? Or will they raise an eyebrow at our tendency to build fast and cheap, wondering why on earth we thought open-plan offices were a good idea? In the end, the legacy of Greek architecture is more than just stone and column. It's a reminder of the human drive to build, to innovate, and to leave a mark, one that whispers through time, we were here, and we made something beautiful. So, as we gaze upon these ancient ruins, let's ask ourselves, what will our own ruins say about us? Will they tell a story of creativity and resilience, or one of missed opportunities and fleeting trends? Only time will tell, but one thing's for sure. History always has a way of keeping us humble. In the sleepy village of Smiljan, Croatia, a kid named Nikola Tesla was busy dreaming up ways to harness nature's energy, which was less a quaint childhood hobby and more like a sign of things to come. Born in 1856, Tesla's brain was a lightning rod for ideas, and this was long before he electrified the world with his alternating current. But back then, he was just a curious kid with a knack for getting struck by the lightning of inspiration, perhaps one of nature's more ironic gifts. Fast forward to 1884, and Tesla decided to trade the rustic charm of his homeland for the smoke and chaos of the United States. He arrived with a suitcase full of dreams, a head full of ideas, and quite literally 4 cents in his pocket. It's a wonder he didn't get charged extra baggage fees for his intellect. The young inventor also carried a letter of introduction to Thomas Edison, the reigning champ of American electricity. But let's be real. The real currency Tesla brought was his prodigious talent. Now, picture Edison as the established rock star of the electric world, drumming away on his direct current, DC guitar, while Tesla rolls into town with his avant-garde alternating current, AC symphony. The stage was set for a legendary showdown, but first, Tesla had to work for Edison. That's right, Tesla, the future icon of innovation, started as Edison's employee, tasked with improving Edison's DC motors. Edison, known for his frugality, promised Tesla a bonus of $50,000 if he succeeded. Tesla did, of course, overhaul those motors, but Edison, ever the businessman, allegedly balked at paying up, saying it was a joke. Talk about a shocking development. Tesla must have felt like he'd been struck by a bolt of betrayal. Enter the war of currents, a clash of titans so electrifying it could have powered a small city. Edison was all about direct current, which was reliable but had a serious case of short-range syndrome. DC required power stations every couple of miles, like Starbucks locations in a busy city. Meanwhile, Tesla's alternating current could travel long distances without losing its oomph, making it an efficient, albeit misunderstood, contender. The public, of course, was caught in the middle, bombarded with propaganda more dramatic than a daytime soap opera. Edison, not one to shy away from a bit of drama, went to great lengths to discredit AC, even resorting to electrocuting animals to prove its dangers. It was a ruthless PR campaign that would make modern spin doctors blush. Yet, despite Edison's theatrics, AC's advantages were clear to those who looked past the spectacle. Tesla's system could light up cities, and with the financial backing of George Westinghouse, Tesla's AC began to gain traction. The turning point came in 1893 at the world's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. This was a fair so grand it makes today's expos look like high school science fairs. Westinghouse and Tesla landed the contract to illuminate the event with AC, beating out Edison's General Electric. For the first time, over 27 million visitors saw the brilliance of Tesla's vision, with 100,000 incandescent lamps lighting up the fairgrounds. It was a luminous victory for Tesla and a dazzling demonstration of AC's potential. In the end, Tesla's alternating current didn't just win the battle, it revolutionized how we power our world. But let's not sugarcoat it. The journey was anything but smooth. Tesla's tale is one of genius and grit, with plenty of sparks flying along the way. His legacy is a testament to the power of innovation and the occasional necessity of standing up to a stubborn establishment. So next time you flip a light switch, remember that it's not just a circuit you're completing. It's a connection to a history charged with rivalry, perseverance, and the relentless pursuit of progress. Now, while Tesla was basking in the glow of his AC triumph, he was already cooking up something even more electrifying: wireless energy. You see, Tesla was the kind of guy who looked at a world strung up with wires and thought, why not cut the cords altogether? In 1891, amidst the clamor of industrial America, Tesla unveiled his Tesla coil, an invention that would become as synonymous with him as peanut butter is with jelly. The Tesla coil wasn't just a gadget. It was a statement, a promise of energy that could leap through the air like a high-wire circus act, defying gravity and convention. Tesla's fascination with wireless energy wasn't just for show. It was rooted in a genuine vision for a future where power was as free-flowing as the air we breathe. Although that sounds like the kind of utopian promise you'd find in a tech startup pitch deck, Tesla had the chops to back it up. The Tesla coil was a device capable of generating high-voltage, low-current, high-frequency alternating current electricity. Picture lightning in a bottle, only the bottle's open, and the lightning's doing a dance routine. It was a glimpse into what Tesla believed could be a future where electricity wouldn't just be accessible, it would be ubiquitous and unbound. But here's the kicker. While Tesla was dreaming of world-changing technologies, he was also struggling to keep his finances from flatlining. Despite his groundbreaking inventions and the fame that came with them, Tesla had a knack for turning financial opportunity into economic calamity. The man was, quite simply, a terrible businessman. It's like giving a culinary genius a recipe for money-making, only to watch them burn water. His focus was always on the next big idea, not the dollar signs that could make those ideas a reality. Enter J.P. Morgan, the titan of finance, whose very name conjures images of top hats, cigars, and vaults filled with gold. In 1901, Morgan decided to bankroll Tesla's most ambitious project, the Wardenclyffe Tower. This was going to be the launchpad for Tesla's grand vision of wireless communication and energy transmission. Standing at 187 feet tall, it was meant to be a beacon for a new age, Tesla's Eiffel Tower of electricity. With $150,000 from Morgan, about $4, $5 million in today's cash, it seemed like Tesla finally had the backing to make his electrifying dreams come true. But the road to innovation is paved with unforeseen obstacles. While Tesla was obsessed with science, Morgan, ever the businessman, was obsessed with profit. He initially saw Wardenclyffe as a way to monopolize the transatlantic wireless telegraphy market. But Tesla's vision outgrew Morgan's pocketbook. When Tesla revealed his intentions to provide free wireless energy to the masses, Morgan was, shall we say, less than thrilled. The idea of free energy was as appealing to Morgan as a cheese grater would be to a block of Parmesan. As funds dwindled and Tesla's grandiose ideas spiraled beyond Morgan's ROI calculations, the project began to falter. Wardenclyffe Tower was never completed, standing as a skeletal monument to what could have been. It's a poignant reminder that even the most brilliant ideas can crash land when they collide with economic reality. Tesla's dream of wireless energy was ahead of its time, but in the cutthroat world of early 20th century capitalism, it was also a liability. Tesla's story is a testament to the tension between innovation and practicality, a clash that still echoes in today's tech startups. It's a tragic comedy of errors, where the protagonist is too visionary for his own good. Tesla continued to tinker and dream, but the financial backing he desperately needed was as elusive as wireless energy itself. Wardenclyffe became a symbol of failure, a cautionary tale about the perilous intersection of genius and finance. Yet, despite these setbacks, the legend of Tesla only grew. The romantic notion of the genius inventor battling against the odds resonated deeply with the public. It's the kind of narrative that sells books, inspires movies, and fuels conspiracy theories. Tesla, with his grand visions and dramatic failures, became a sort of patron saint for dreamers and underdogs everywhere. He embodied the idea that true innovation often comes with a hefty price, both financially and personally. The myth of Tesla is as much about his failures as his successes. His story is a reminder that genius is rarely rewarded in its own time, and that the march of progress is not always a straight line. Tesla's legacy, though fraught with financial missteps, is a testament to the power of imagination and the enduring allure of the impossible dream. As we move forward, it's clear that Tesla's story isn't just a piece of history. It's a blueprint for how we think about innovation, risk, and the future. And while we leave Wardenclyffe behind, the tale of Nikola Tesla is far from over. As Tesla left the shadow of Wardenclyffe's skeletal remains, his life took a turn into the realm of the truly bizarre, proving that reality is often stranger than fiction. It's as if the inventor's mind, unshackled from the constraints of practical endeavor, decided to explore the uncharted territories of eccentricity. After all, why settle for the mundane when you can communicate with extraterrestrials or find companionship in a flock of pigeons? Let's start with Tesla's avian obsession. While some folks find solace in a pet dog or cat, Tesla preferred the company of pigeons. And not just any pigeons. He had a particular feathered friend in New York City that he reportedly adored. He would feed them, nurse them back to health, and even claim to love one special white pigeon as he would a human. In his own words, Tesla once confessed, "I loved that pigeon as a man loves a woman, and she loved me." It's a relationship that sounds straight out of a romantic comedy, albeit one with a cooing, feathery twist. It's a testament to Tesla's unique brand of isolation, where pigeons filled the social void left by human companionship. But pigeons weren't the only things Tesla communicated with, or so he claimed. In 1899, during experiments in Colorado Springs, Tesla reported receiving strange signals on his equipment. He was convinced these were from Mars, a notion that sounds like the plot of a sci-fi novel, but was, in Tesla's mind, a legitimate possibility. It's easy to see why the public was captivated by such claims. Who wouldn't be intrigued by the idea of Martians sending cosmic postcards? Of course, modern science suggests Tesla may have intercepted natural radio waves or signals from space phenomena. But at the time, he was practically the Fox Mulder of his day, insistent that the truth was out there. Tesla's later years were also characterized by a peculiar obsession with germs, to the point of compulsion. He was known to meticulously clean his eating utensils and wash his hands with a frequency that would make today's hygiene standards look lax. Tesla would check into hotel rooms and demand they be scrubbed clean to his specifications. If germophobia were a competitive sport, Tesla would have been an Olympic contender. It's a curious quirk, perhaps a reaction to the chaos of his professional life, a need to exert control over at least one aspect of his environment. Amidst these eccentricities, Tesla continued to dream big, even as his fortunes dwindled. Enter the infamous death ray, a device he claimed could bring down entire armies, effectively rendering war obsolete. In 1934, Tesla described his invention to the press as a teleforce weapon that could generate an intense beam of energy. It's the kind of claim that sounds like a precursor to modern laser technology or something out of a James Bond film. Yet, for all its dramatic flair, the death ray never materialized beyond the realm of Tesla's imagination. Skeptics argue it was a publicity stunt to revive interest and financial backing in Tesla's work. Still, the legend of the death ray endures, a tantalizing what-if in the annals of speculative science. Tesla's aspirations didn't stop with weapons of mass destruction. He still harbored dreams of a global wireless communication system, a concept that predated the internet by several decades. Imagine a world where information flowed through the airwaves, unbounded by wires, a vision very much in line with today's connected realities. Tesla envisioned a network where anyone could transmit and receive data and images across vast distances. It was a bold plan, but like many of Tesla's grand ideas, it was hampered by a lack of funding and the technological limitations of the time. The irony is that Tesla's concept of a connected world is now our everyday reality, though he never lived to see it. As Tesla aged, his fortunes continued to decline. His once grand lifestyle shrank to a single room at the Hotel New Yorker, where he lived out his final days. It's a poignant image, the great innovator who lit up the world with his ideas, now residing in the dim glow of his past successes. By the time of his death in 1943, at the age of 86, Tesla was largely forgotten by the public, his name overshadowed by other titans of industry. Yet, his story was far from over. The FBI, in a move that sounds like the opening scene of a spy thriller, swooped in and seized his papers immediately following his death. They were worried that his alleged inventions might fall into the wrong hands. Even in death, Tesla's legacy was shrouded in mystery and intrigue. Tesla's later years paint a picture of a man caught between the brilliance of his mind and the limitations of his circumstances. His life was a tapestry woven with strands of genius and strands of peculiarity. It's a reminder that the line between brilliance and madness is often thin, and sometimes the most innovative minds are also the most misunderstood. As we delve deeper into Tesla's legacy, it's clear that his influence echoes through time, a testament to the enduring power of imagination. Stay tuned as we continue to unravel the complexities of his life and the myths that surround him, because, with Tesla, the truth is always stranger than fiction. As Tesla's story fades into the sepia-toned shadows of history, you'd think his tale would gather dust like an old library book. But no, the man who once claimed to love a pigeon like a human got a posthumous makeover that would make even the most seasoned PR agents envious. Enter the 21st century, where Tesla's name is more viral than a cat video, and his persona more intriguing than any script Hollywood could dream up. Let's kick things off with pop culture, that relentless machine that can turn even the most obscure figures into household names. Tesla's resurrection began in earnest in the late 20th century, when his life story started to read more like mythic folklore than dry biography. By the time David Bowie portrayed him in Christopher Nolan's film Asterisk, the Prestige Asterisk in 2006, Tesla was a full-fledged icon. Bowie's Tesla was mysterious, otherworldly, and just the right amount of eccentric, qualities that pop culture loves to amplify and audiences can't resist. Tesla's revival wasn't just about charisma, though. It was tied to the rising interest in the technologies he pioneered. Take radio, for instance. While Guglielmo Marconi often gets the shiny inventor badge for the radio, Tesla's work on wireless transmission laid the groundwork. In 1943, just months after his death, the U.S. Supreme Court decided Tesla had priority over Marconi for several radio patents. It's a legal nod that Tesla himself didn't live to see, but it's a testament to his role as a technological trailblazer. Then there's robotics. Tesla was dreaming up the idea of automata, self-operating machines, back in the 1890s, when the word robot wasn't even in the vocabulary. In 1898, he demonstrated a radio-controlled boat, a pint-sized predecessor to the drones we see buzzing around today. It was a watershed moment, a peek into a future where machines could think, or at least move, on their own. Fast forward to the renewable energy boom of the 21st century, and it's clear Tesla's ideas were as prescient as they were prolific. His vision of sustainable energy wasn't just a footnote in his biography, it was the headline. While many of his contemporaries were busy burning coal and oil, Tesla imagined harnessing the power of the sun, wind, and water. It's the kind of forward thinking that resonates deeply in today's energy-conscious world. As we slap solar panels on rooftops and erect wind turbines in open fields, we're essentially walking the path Tesla mapped out over a century ago. But hold on a second. Let's not get too swept up in the romance of it all. Tesla's modern-day prominence sometimes casts a long shadow over the nitty-gritty, practical impact of his work. For instance, the Tesla brand, synonymous with cutting-edge electric cars, is more a nod to his visionary spirit than a direct result of his inventions. Elon Musk, the face behind Tesla, Inc., has admitted that the company chose the name to honor the inventor's contributions to AC power, not because Tesla directly designed the sleek vehicles that now swerve through traffic. Moreover, this resurgence has glossed over some of Tesla's more, shall we say, less marketable traits. His financial missteps, eccentric behavior, and the fact that he died penniless in a hotel room often get the Cinderella treatment, transformed into quirky footnotes rather than cautionary tales. It's easy to see why. The image of the tortured genius is far more alluring than that of a man who couldn't balance a checkbook. And let's not forget the conspiracy theories. A quick internet search will reveal a rabbit hole of speculation, from the U.S. government allegedly suppressing Tesla's death ray technology to claims that he was assassinated to stop his inventions. These theories, while entertaining, often blur the line between myth and reality, overshadowing the tangible legacies of his work. They make for fantastic stories, but often distract from the real-world applications and challenges Tesla faced. Yet, it's undeniable that Tesla's influence stretches far beyond the pages of history books or the frames of a movie. His ideas have become the backbone of modern technological advancements. His alternating current system powers our homes and cities. His concept of wireless communication predated Wi-Fi, and his dreams of sustainable energy are now global imperatives. The man was a century ahead of his time, a visionary who saw possibilities where others saw limits. Tesla's life was a roller coaster of invention and imagination, peppered with moments of triumph and tragedy. While his posthumous reputation is sometimes more spectacle than substance, there's no denying the profound impact he's had on the world. He's the patron saint of inventors and dreamers, symbol of innovation unfettered by the constraints of his era. So, as we continue to unravel the complexities of Tesla's life, remember that his story is more than just a myth in the making. It's a testament to the power of dreaming big, even if those dreams sometimes outstrip reality. And while Tesla's legacy is far from over, there's plenty more to explore in the fascinating tale of the man who electrified the world. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into the narrative, because with Tesla, there's always more than meets the eye. Tesla's legacy is the ultimate paradox, a tale where failure is just a stepping stone to immortality, and where the legend sometimes overshadows the man himself. In reflecting on his contributions, it's hard not to get swept up in the drama of it all. Here was a man whose ideas were so far ahead of their time, they made the future look like old news. Yet, Tesla's life is also a cautionary tale, a reminder that genius without financial savvy can leave you in the dark, both metaphorically and literally. Let's start with the nuts and bolts of Tesla's contributions, because it's not just about flashy inventions and eccentricity. Tesla's alternating current, AC, laid the groundwork for the modern electrical age. AC's ability to transmit electricity over long distances without significant loss was revolutionary. It was like giving the world a superhighway for electrons, while Edison's direct current, DC, was stuck in the slow lane. Today, the electrical grid that powers our lives, from the flick of a light switched to the buzz of a smartphone, owes its existence to Tesla's vision. Without AC, our world would likely be a dimmer, less connected place. But let's not sugarcoat it. Tesla's brilliance was often eclipsed by his inability to capitalize on it. Financial mismanagement was Tesla's Achilles heel. The man could create a storm of innovation, but was often left standing in the rain when it came to monetizing those ideas. Consider the $50,000 Edison allegedly promised him, a sum that would be roughly $4 million today. Tesla's failure to secure that money was an early warning sign of his financial naivety, a recurring theme throughout his life. His struggles underscore a harsh reality. In the world of invention, genius is just the starting bid, and without a solid financial strategy, even the brightest ideas can end up bankrupt. Tesla's life story is a masterclass in how not to handle your finances, but it also serves as an enduring beacon for dreamers. In the 21st century, Tesla's story resonates with the startup culture, where innovation is king, and the next big idea is always just around the corner. However, Tesla's narrative is a reminder that behind every groundbreaking idea, there needs to be a business plan, or at least someone who knows how to read one. Otherwise, you might create world-changing technology and still end up alone in a hotel room, wondering where it all went wrong. Tesla's status as a cult icon is another fascinating twist in his posthumous tale. Today, he's practically the patron saint of the underdog inventor. His story is one of relentless pursuit and passion, qualities that resonate deeply in a world where innovation is often stifled by the status quo. Tesla's name has become a rallying cry for those who dare to dream beyond the possible. His life embodies the romantic notion of the lone genius, battling against the odds, a narrative that's as appealing as it is misleading. The reality is that Tesla's genius did not operate in a vacuum. It thrived in the fertile ground of collaboration and competition, a lesson often lost in the myth-making. And let's not forget the Tesla brand, a name that now adorns cutting-edge electric cars, a testament to his enduring influence. Elon Musk's Tesla, Inc., is less of a direct descendant of Nikola's inventions and more a homage to his vision for a sustainable future. It's a fitting tribute, given that Tesla was one of the first to dream of harnessing renewable energy. Yet the irony is palpable. A company named after a man who died penniless is now one of the most valuable in the world. It's a twist that Tesla himself might have appreciated, a nod to the unpredictable nature of legacy. In the realm of science, Tesla's ideas continue to spark curiosity and innovation. His concept of wireless energy transmission, though never realized in his lifetime, is now a hotbed of research. From wireless phone charging to the potential for transmitting electricity across cities without wires, Tesla's dreams are inching closer to reality. It's a testament to his foresight that the scientific community is still exploring his ideas, proving that while Tesla may have been ahead of his time is, in many ways, yet to come. But while Tesla's legacy is a tapestry of triumph and tragedy, it also serves as a reflection on the nature of innovation itself. His story is a reminder that progress is often messy, non-linear, and fraught with setbacks. Tesla's life was a series of peaks and valleys, each contributing to the grand narrative of technological advancement. It's a narrative that continues to inspire, challenge, and provoke, much like the man himself. In conclusion, Nikola Tesla's legacy is a complex blend of myth and reality, a story that defies simple categorization. His contributions laid the foundation for the modern electrical age, while his life serves as both an inspiration and a warning. Tesla's ideas continue to resonate, echoing through the corridors of scientific exploration and technological innovation. As we flip the switch on our lights or charge our devices, we're not just engaging with technology, we're participating in a legacy that began with a brilliant mind in a world that was just beginning to imagine what was possible. Tesla's life may have ended in obscurity, but his influence is anything but obscure. It's a testament to the enduring power of imagination and the timeless allure of the impossible dream. In the end, Tesla's story is a reminder that while the world may not always recognize genius in its own time, the light it brings can illuminate the path for generations to come. So, as you drift off to sleep, remember that Tesla's legacy is more than just a tale of what was. It's a story of what can be, a timeless testament to the power of dreaming big. The street buzzes with the swish of sandals and the hum of anticipation. You're not just in any ancient city. You're in Babylon, the crown jewel of the Mesopotamian world, and the stage is set for the Eccentric festival. This isn't just a quaint gathering of toga-wearing folks sipping on fermented barley drinks. No, this is the New Year's bash of the millennium, 2000 BCE style, and it's about to get epic. Babylon, with its ziggurats towering like stairways to heaven, was a city that loved its rituals as much as its architecture. Imagine a sea of people flooding the streets, all here for one reason: to ensure the guards don't get bored of them and decide to play cosmic dodgeball with unpleasant consequences. But here's where things get juicy. The main event, the king himself getting slapped. Hard. No, seriously. The ritual was a slapstick comedy, minus the comedy and heavy on the slap. Now, you might be scratching your head thinking, why on earth would a king, the supreme ruler, the big cheese, get whacked on the face in public? Well, it turns out this wasn't just an ancient prank gone wrong. The slap was a serious business. It was thought that if the king shed a tear, it meant the guards were on his side. If he didn't, well, let's just say the guards might have had a rain check on their blessings. The Eccentric festival wasn't just a one-day gig. This was an 11-day marathon of rituals, feasting, and more than a few hangovers from too much date wine. The party kicked off at the Temple of Marduk, the top god in the Babylonian pantheon, whose ego was as towering as the ziggurat dedicated to him. The priests would drag a statue of Marduk out of the temple, parading him around like a rock star on tour, presumably to remind everyone who was really in charge. As you wind through the city's bustling streets, the air thick with incense and anticipation, it's almost impossible not to feel swept up in the grandeur. But beneath the glamour and pageantry, there's a sharp edge to all these festivities. You see, these public displays were crucial in maintaining political stability. The king, by getting publicly humiliated, was showing his humility. It was a social contract of sorts. His vulnerability was a promise of benevolent rule, a reminder that even he was subject to forces greater than himself. And speaking of forces greater than oneself, let's talk about the economy. Hosting a bash of this scale wasn't cheap. We're talking thousands of shekels, an ancient currency that was the Bitcoin of its day, spent on food, drink, sacrificial animals, and enough decor to make even the most lavish modern party planner break a sweat. All this madness was supposed to ensure that the coming year was fruitful, with bumper crops and a population that stayed just the right side of rebellious. But let's not get too romantic about it. While the Eccentric festival sounds like a hoot, the reality is that these rituals also served as a grim reminder of what happened if the gods weren't appeased. Drought, famine, and invasions from those pesky Elamites were always looming threats. Spectacle was both a celebration and a desperate plea for stability in a world where a good harvest was never guaranteed. As you take in the sights and sounds of Babylon, it's clear that the Eccentric festival was more than just a New Year's party. It was a complex dance of politics, religion, and economics that kept the wheels of Babylon turning smoothly, at least until the next invasion or natural disaster came knocking. The slap the king received might seem bizarre to us, but back then it was a small price to pay for the hope of divine favor and a prosperous year ahead. So, while you might not envy the king's red cheeks, you can appreciate the delicate balance of power, faith, and spectacle that made Babylon the legendary city it was. Now, If you thought the king's slap was the height of Babylonian eccentricity, buckle up, because we're about to dive into some truly gutsy business. Literally. In ancient Babylon, the future wasn't read in the stars, tea leaves, or the dubious wisdom of your Aunt Mildred's tarot cards. Nope, the Babylonians preferred a more visceral approach, hepatoscopy, or as it's more commonly known, liver divination. Yes, you heard that right. These folks were peering into animal livers as if they were cosmic crystal balls. Move over, magic 8-ball, there's a new oracle in town. Picture this, a priest decked out in ceremonial garb, standing over a freshly sacrificed sheep. He wasn't just there to make lamb chops. No, this was a high-stakes game of liver reading. The liver was considered the seat of life, kind of like the ancient equivalent of a hard drive storing the universe's secrets. By examining its shape, color, and peculiarities, the priest would interpret what the gods had in store. A blemish here or a lobe there could mean the difference between a bumper crop or a famine, a victorious battle or a devastating defeat. Talk about pressure. Hepatoscopy was a full-blown science in Babylon. They had clay models of livers with annotations to guide the diviners, like a cheat sheet for your astrology-obsessed cousin. Each mark and anomaly had a specific meaning, and these priests weren't just winging it. They were highly trained, the ancient equivalent of a PhD in cosmic forecasting. In fact, historical records like the Barutu, a multi-tablet manual, detailed the intricate art of liver divination. It was the Babylonian Goda guide for all things entrails, sort of like a macabre version of divination for dummies. Now, you might be wondering why anyone would trust their fate to the whims of animal innards. But here's the kicker. It wasn't just superstition. This practice was deeply rooted in Babylonian society's need for stability in a world that was anything but stable. The Tigris and Euphrates might have gifted fertile soil, but they were also prone to sudden floods. And let's not forget the ever-present threat of neighboring tribes with their own ambitions. In such a volatile environment, any edge, no matter how slippery with sheep guts, was worth considering. Of course, liver divination wasn't the only trick up the Babylonian sleeve. These ancient folks were also stargazers par excellence. Long before Galileo pointed his telescope toward the heavens, Babylonian astronomers were charting the skies with an accuracy that would make your local weather forecaster blush. They meticulously recorded celestial movements, linking them to earthly events. If Mars was doing a little dance across the sky, maybe it was time to re-evaluate that military campaign. Their astronomical tables were more precise than a Swiss watch, predicting eclipses, planetary movements, and even solstices. The Babylonians viewed the cosmos as a divine manuscript, and they were determined to decipher every line. This was no passive hobby for a rainy day. It was a cornerstone of their decision-making process. Imagine planning a major agricultural initiative or a city expansion and pausing to consult the latest sky report. In a society where the king's slap on the face was an annual event, aligning your actions with the heavens was a strategic necessity. But let's not get too starry-eyed about their astronomical prowess. While their observations were groundbreaking, they weren't exactly sending rovers to Mars. The Babylonian approach was more akin to a cosmic spreadsheet, noting patterns and cycles without necessarily understanding the why behind them. It was empirical genius wrapped in mythological mystery, a dance between observation and divine interpretation. And let's face it, in a world where a wrong prediction could spell disaster, who wouldn't want to hedge their bets with celestial intel? So, there you have it. The Babylonians were trailblazers in the art of divination, blending animal entrails and star charts into a complex tapestry of ritual and reason. Whether it was the liver's cryptic messages or the stars' silent counsel, these practices were vital threads in the fabric of Babylonian life. They remind us that while the methods may seem bizarre, the quest for certainty in an uncertain world is a timeless pursuit. So next time you're tempted to dismiss ancient rituals as mere superstition, remember the Babylonians and their cosmic calculus. They might have been onto something after all. Stay tuned, because the saga of Babylonian rituals is far from over. There's a whole world of ancient wonders left to explore, and we're just getting started. Now, let's switch gears from cosmic mysteries to the earthly affairs of the heart, or more accurately, the strategic chessboard of ancient Babylonian marriages. If you think modern weddings are a logistical nightmare, wait until you hear about the rituals that would have even the most seasoned wedding planner tossing their clipboard in despair. Forget about love and romance. Babylonian marriages were less about finding your soulmate and more about ensuring your family didn't end up on the wrong side of a land dispute. These unions were strategic alliances, meticulously negotiated like a high-stakes poker game where the chips were dowries and bride prices. Picture the father of the bride not shedding a tear of joy, but meticulously counting the shekels exchanged. Yep, love might have been blind, but the Babylonians had 20/20 vision when it came to economics. So, what's the deal with dowries and bride prices? Think of them as the ancient equivalent of a prenuptial agreement, but with livestock and silver instead of lawyers and legal jargon. A dowry was a transfer of parental property, essentially the bride's family offering a financial cushion to help the newlyweds get started, or more cynically, to sweeten the deal for the groom's family. On the flip side, the bride price was what the groom's family forked out to seal the deal. You could say it was their way of saying, "Thanks for letting us borrow your daughter for the rest of her life." But these transactions weren't just about cold, hard cash, or more accurately, silver bars and livestock. They reflected the economic realities of the time. In a society where agriculture was king and land was power, these marriages were cleverly disguised land deals. The more land and resources a family controlled, the more influence they wielded. And let's not forget the importance of heirs. The pressure to produce a male heir was enormous, and these alliances often revolved around the potential to expand the family legacy. For women, the stakes were high, and the societal expectations were even higher. While men were out there swinging their metaphorical swords, women were expected to be the glue holding these strategic alliances together. But don't be fooled into thinking they were mere pawns in this game. Women in Babylon, though primarily seen through the lens of marriage and motherhood, had their own roles in religious and economic spheres. They could own property, engage in business, and even become priestesses. That said, the weight of expectations was heavy, and the societal scales were anything but balanced. Just imagine a young Babylonian woman on her wedding day, draped in her finest textiles, probably more nervous about the alliance implications than the vows themselves. The ceremony was a public affair, a community spectacle where everyone from the bride's second cousin to the local parter had a stake in its success. The rituals themselves were a blend of solemnity and practicality, with the exchange of gifts and the signing of contracts. Yes, contracts. Because what's a marriage without a little paperwork to seal the romance? But before you get swept up in the grandeur of these ceremonies, remember that the reality behind the silk veils and ceremonial toasts was often far from idyllic. These marriages were a lifeline in a turbulent world, a way to secure alliances and ensure the survival of the family line. The rituals were steeped in symbolism, from the shared meal representing unity to the anointing with sacred oils, a nod to the divine blessing the union was supposed to possess. Yet, for all the pomp and circumstance, there was an undeniable pragmatism at play. The bride's family was essentially entrusting their daughter to another household, hoping she'd be treated well, and that her offspring would bring prosperity. It was less about a perfect love story, and more about ensuring the family ledger stayed in the black. And while we might cringe at the transactional nature of these unions, it's worth remembering that in a world where survival was a daily battle, these marriages were a strategic necessity. So, next time you're at a wedding, caught up in the romance and the open bar, spare a thought for our Babylonian counterparts. Their marriages were a reflection of their world, a world where the line between survival and celebration was as thin as the papyrus their contracts were written on. Theirs was a society that understood the intricate dance between love, power, and economics, even if it wasn't always a waltz. But don't hang up your ceremonial robes just yet. We're only scratching the surface of Babylonian life. There's still a treasure trove of rituals and traditions left to uncover as we continue our journey through this ancient metropolis. Stay with me as we delve deeper into the customs that kept Babylon ticking, and who knows, you might just find a new appreciation for the ancient wisdom tucked beneath those dusty ziggurats. As we leave the nuptial negotiations of Babylon's past behind, let's pivot to a topic that's equally rich in ritual, and just as heavy with symbolism: death. Now, before you yawn and think dusty tombs and dreary dirges, let me assure you, the Babylonians knew how to send off their dead with a flair that would make even the most extravagant modern funeral look like a backyard barbecue. First off, let's get one thing straight. Babylonian burial practices were less about the dead and more about the living. That's right. The afterlife was an eternal version of keeping up with the Joneses, except in this case, the Joneses were your ancestors, and they expected you to show up with offerings. Why? Because in ancient Babylon, your status in the afterlife was directly linked to the care and feeding of your spirit. No golden chariot to the heavens without the right connections and enough grub to keep your ghostly stomach happy. For the Babylonian elite, death was the ultimate status symbol, a chance to flaunt wealth one last time. We're talking tombs that would make even the pharaohs do a double take. These mausoleums were often elaborate affairs, complete with intricate carvings, precious stones, and enough artifacts to stock a museum. Being buried with your riches wasn't just a personal choice. It was practically a cosmic investment portfolio designed to ensure a comfortable afterlife. And how much did one of these opulent send-offs cost, you ask? Well, think of it as the ancient equivalent of a small country's GDP. We're talking thousands of shekels spent on everything from jewel-encrusted sarcophagi to elaborate feasts for the living guests. It wasn't just about showing off. It was about securing your place in the afterlife's social hierarchy, a cosmic club membership that required both wealth and the right sacrifices. But what about the average Babylonian, whose pockets weren't exactly overflowing with shekels? For them, creativity was key. While they might not have been able to afford a tomb fit for a king, they weren't about to let a little thing like finances stop them from securing a place in the afterlife, into the communal grave, a cost-effective solution where families pooled resources to ensure their loved ones were buried with dignity, if not decadence. These shared resting places were less about grandeur and more about practicality, a testament to the communal spirit of survival in ancient Babylon. Now, let's talk about the rituals themselves. Babylonian funerals were a blend of solemnity and practicality, with a hefty dose of superstition thrown in for good measure. The deceased were prepared with oils and wrapped in fine linens, if you could afford them, of course. The body would then be laid to rest with an assortment of grave goods, ranging from pottery to personal items that were believed to be useful in the afterlife. Think of it as packing for the ultimate long-term vacation, with the added pressure of ensuring your eternal comfort. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Babylonian belief in the afterlife wasn't just a vague notion of paradise or punishment. It was a structured society, complete with its own rules and hierarchies. Your standing in this otherworldly realm was directly influenced by the offerings and sacrifices made by your descendants. No offerings. Well, enjoy your afterlife as a hungry ghost wandering the netherworld. It was a system that kept the living engaged in a continuous cycle of remembrance and ritual, ensuring that the dead were not just forgotten names on a stone slab. This belief in a transactional afterlife wasn't just a quirk of Babylonian spirituality. It was a reflection of their societal values. In a world where alliances and social standing were paramount, the notion that these concepts extended beyond death was a natural extension of their worldview. It was a way to maintain social cohesion and continuity, ensuring that the ties binding families and communities remained strong even in the face of mortality. Of course, not everyone bought into the idea of an afterlife filled with feasting and socializing. Some saw it as a necessary fiction, a comforting story that helped the living cope with the inevitable. But even skeptics couldn't deny the power of these rituals in shaping Babylonian society. They were a reminder of the delicate balance between life and death, a dance that never stopped, even when the music did. So, next time you find yourself pondering the mysteries of the afterlife, spare a thought for our Babylonian ancestors. They might not have had all the answers, but their rituals and beliefs offer a fascinating glimpse into a world where death was just another chapter in the grand narrative of life. And as we continue our exploration of Babylon's ancient wonders, remember that the stories of the dead are as vital as those of the living, threads woven into the rich tapestry of history that continues to captivate us today. But hold on to your ziggurates, because we're not done yet. There's still more to uncover in the enigmatic world of Babylonian rituals, where the lines between myth and reality blur in the most intriguing ways. Stick with me as we journey deeper into the customs and beliefs that shape this ancient metropolis, And who knows, you might just find a new appreciation for the timeless dance between life, death, and everything in between. As the dust settles on our whirlwind tour of Babylonian customs, you might be wondering how these seemingly peculiar rituals fit into the grand tapestry of everyday life in ancient Mesopotamia. Let's face it, a king getting slapped and sheep livers being read like cosmic tea leaves aren't just quirky footnotes in history. They're the threads that wove the social fabric of Babylon, a city that thrived in the unpredictable playground of the ancient world. First, let's peel back the layers of these rituals to see them for what they truly were, a way to impose order on chaos. In Babylon, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers could both bless and curse the land, certainty was a rare commodity. Into the Achaemenid festival, a kind of New Year's reset button that ensured everyone from the king to the commoner knew their place in the cosmic hierarchy. The king's annual slap wasn't just a ritualistic oddity. It was a public spectacle that reinforced the notion of divine kingship. It reminded everyone that even the most powerful man in Babylon was just a pawn in the gods' grand game. And then there's liver divination, or hepatoscopy, which might seem like a bizarre form of fortune-telling. But when you consider the stakes, predicting the outcome of wars, harvests, and political alliances, it becomes clear why the Babylonians took it so seriously. In an era without weather apps or economic forecasts, reading a liver was as close to data analytics as you could get. Priests equipped with their clay liver models and annotated manuals were essentially the ancient world's version of statisticians, trying to make sense of a world where the next flood or famine was always just a bad omen away. The same practical approach applied to marriage and death. Babylonian marriages were less about romantic moonlit walks and more about securing alliances and property. They were strategic plays in the game of life, where dowries and bride prices were the chips on the table. It was a system that ensured stability and continuity in a world where power dynamics were constantly shifting. Love might have been a bonus, but the real victory was in the land and legacy secured with each union. As for death, Babylonian funerals were less about mourning and more about maintaining social order beyond the grave. The concept of a transactional afterlife kept the living engaged in a perpetual cycle of offerings and remembrance, ensuring that the ties binding families and communities remained strong. It was a cosmic insurance policy, a way to guarantee that societal bonds held firm even as the sands of time shifted. Now, let's talk myths versus reality. The romantic allure of these rituals, steeped in mystery and drama, often overshadows their more pragmatic roots. It's easy to view the Achaemenid festival as a grandiose celebration, or liver readings as mystical mumbo-jumbo. But pull back the curtain, and you'll find a society using these rituals not just to appease the gods, but to navigate the very real challenges of their environment. It's a classic case of myth and reality dancing in tandem, each borrowing from the other to maintain the delicate balance of Babylonian life. And here's the kicker. Many of these ancient practices echo in our modern world. The Babylonian obsession with celestial patterns laid the groundwork for astronomy as we know it. Their meticulous record-keeping and analytical approach to the cosmos were precursors to our own scientific methods. Meanwhile, the transactional nature of their marriages and funerals might seem cold, but isn't that just another way of ensuring the survival of the fittest? Even today, economic considerations often underpin our personal and social decisions, whether we admit it or not. So, as we wrap up our exploration of Babylonian rituals, let's not dismiss them as mere eccentricities of a bygone era. They were, in fact, ingenious solutions to timeless challenges, how to survive, thrive, and find meaning in a chaotic world. Whether through a king's humbling slap, a priest's liver reading, or a bride's dowry negotiation, these rituals provided a framework for order and cohesion. They remind us that while the specifics may change, the human quest for certainty, stability, and purpose remains as relevant today as it was thousands of years ago. In the end, the legacy of Babylon isn't just in its grand ziggurats or its epic tales. It's in the enduring human desire to make sense of the world, to find structure amidst chaos, and to ensure that, come what may, we can face the future with at least some semblance of preparation. So next time you're grappling with the unpredictable nature of life, take a page from the Babylonians. They might not have had all the answers, but they certainly knew how to dance with the uncertainties. And in that dance, there's a lesson for us all. Sometimes, the rituals that seem the strangest are the ones that keep us sane. You're standing in the shadow of a stone behemoth, a testament to Roman audacity and a little bit of their questionable taste in entertainment. We're talking about the Colosseum, or as it was known back then, the Flavian Amphitheater. This isn't just an old pile of rocks. It's the ancient equivalent of a Hollywood blockbuster set where emperors showcased their power and the common folk got their fill of bread and circuses, minus the bread, of course. Now, if you think the Colosseum just popped up overnight, like some kind of ancient fast food joint, think again. This architectural marvel didn't build itself. The whole process kicked off around 70-72 AD under Emperor Vespasian and wasn't wrapped up until 80 AD during the reign of his son, Titus. That's almost a decade of chiseling, hauling, and sweating. And nope, it wasn't all done by happy-go-lucky Romans either. The labor force, a massive contingent of slaves and prisoners of war, primarily from the Jewish rebellion. Talk about a construction crew with no union benefits. Let's clear up some cobwebbed myths. There's this persistent image of Roman citizens voluntarily chipping away at marble, fueled by patriotic zeal and the promise of future gladiatorial glory. But in reality, it was the captured souls from the Jewish war who were doing the heavy lifting, the spoils from the siege of Jerusalem. They bankrolled a good chunk of this project. The Romans were nothing if not resourceful, funneling war profits into building a monument to their own power. And speaking of power, the Colosseum was a political chess move as much as it was an entertainment venue. Vespasian wasn't just building for the fun of it. He had a dynasty to establish, a reputation to salvage after the chaotic year of the 4 emperors. And what better way to cement your legacy than by giving the people what they want? A colossal arena for blood sports and spectacles. The logistics of this colossal enterprise would make even the most seasoned project manager break a sweat. We're talking about a structure that could seat upwards of 50,000 spectators. That's roughly the capacity of Yankee Stadium today, minus the hot dogs and peanuts. The Colosseum's outer wall stands at about 159 feet, with a base area spanning 6 acres. That's not just a building, that's an ancient megastructure. The amount of stone, primarily travertine from nearby Tivoli, is estimated at around 100,000 cubic meters. That's a lot of rocks to move without modern machinery. And yet, the Romans managed it with sheer manpower, and let's be honest, a splash of brutality. The cost, astronomical, but it was an investment in public appeasement and imperial propaganda. To put it in perspective, the construction of the Colosseum was part of a broader initiative to win over the public and stabilize the empire. The estimated cost, if you adjust for inflation and all that jazz, would be in the billions today. But for Rome, it was worth every sestertius if it meant keeping the populace entertained and distracted from the empire's more pressing issues, like, say, constant warfare and political corruption. So, what's the deal with all those romanticized tales of the Colosseum's grandeur? Sure, it was magnificent, but let's not gloss over the gritty reality of its inception. The Colosseum wasn't just a venue, it was a statement carved from the sweat of slaves and funded by imperial ambition. It's a monument to human ingenuity, yes, but also to the lengths rulers will go to maintain power. This amphitheater wasn't just about showing off Roman engineering prowess. It was about control. The spectacles held within those towering walls were a tool of the state, a way to keep the masses entertained and compliant. Bread and circuses weren't just a catchy phrase. They were a tried and true method of governance. The Colosseum was Rome's way of saying, look what we can build, look what we can do, and look how much fun we're having while doing it. In the grand scheme of things, the construction of the Colosseum was as much about politics as it was about architecture. It was a stage for the emperors to perform their roles as benevolent rulers and mighty warriors. The sheer scale of the Colosseum was a reflection of the empire's power, a reminder of Rome's ability to conquer and create. But beneath the grandeur and the glory lay a foundation built on exploitation and imperial ambition. So, next time you find yourself gazing at this ancient wonder, remember that it wasn't just an arena for games. It was a symbol of Rome's might, a testament to its engineering capabilities, and a reminder of the complex interplay between power and entertainment. The Colosseum stands as a relic of a time when emperors ruled with spectacle, and the masses were pacified with bloodshed. It's a reminder that history is as much about the myths we tell ourselves as it is about the gritty realities we often choose to overlook. And while we're dissecting the gritty truths behind Rome's most famous amphitheater, let's dive into the daily life of those who flock to its grand displays. Imagine being a Roman citizen on game day. It's not just about strolling into the Colosseum as if it were your local sports bar. Oh no, attending was an event in itself, a spectacle before the spectacle, if you will. First off, let's talk seating. This wasn't your typical first-come, first-served scenario. The Colosseum was like a microcosm of Roman society, with seating arrangements meticulously reflecting the social ladder. The emperor and his entourage got the best seats in the house, the imperial box with the primo view. Below him sat the senators, the elite of the elite, enjoying the games from the first tier. The equestrians, kind of like the Roman middle class, filled the second tier. And for the everyday citizens, the plebeians, they were perched up on the third and fourth tiers, closer to the sky than the action. But hey, at least they were inside. Here's a juicy tidbit. The topmost tier was reserved for women and the urban poor. That's right, ladies and the less fortunate were stuck in the nosebleeds. The plebs might have had the worst views, but they had the most fun. They were the rowdy ones, rooting for their favorite gladiators, making bets, and reveling in the organized chaos. It's like the difference between a corporate luxury box and the bleachers at a baseball game. One's all about schmoozing, the other's about the game. Now, you might be wondering about the cost of admission. The legend goes that the games were free, a generous gift from the emperor to his loyal subjects. But let's not get carried away with the whole freebie narrative. Sure, the tickets themselves didn't cost a dime, but the hidden expenses were as real as a gladiator's sword. Think travel costs, food, and that all-important toga cleaning bill after a day of sweating in the Roman sun. Speaking of food, feeding the masses was no small feat. Vendors lined the pathways, hawking everything from snacks to souvenirs. Imagine a bustling marketplace, with the smell of roasted meats wafting through the air and the cacophony of haggling and laughter. Local vendors seized the opportunity to make a killing, selling their wares to hungry spectators. It was capitalism in a tunic, folks. And let's not forget the economic impact on those vendors. On game days, the Colosseum was a bustling hub of commerce. The influx of spectators meant a spike in demand for food, drink, and other essentials. Vendors knew this was their chance to cash in, and they weren't shy about marking up prices. It was like the Super Bowl halftime show for ancient entrepreneurs. But what about the so-called free entertainment? Here's where we peel back the layers of myth. Emperors were indeed footing the bill for the games, using them as a tool to curry favor and keep the populace pacified. However, the Roman populace wasn't exactly getting a free ride. The games were funded through taxes and tributes extracted from the provinces. So while the citizens enjoyed the show, the empire was quietly recouping its costs from its far-flung territories. And let's not romanticize the experience too much. Sure, there was excitement in the air, but there was also the stench of overcrowding and the risk of pickpockets. The Colosseum was a microcosm of Rome, vibrant, chaotic, and a little bit dangerous. It was where the highs of human achievement met the lows of human behavior. In essence, a day at the Colosseum was a masterclass in Roman society. It reflected the empire's social stratifications, economic systems, and political strategies. The seating arrangements, the cost, the bustling vendors, they all told a story of a society that thrived on spectacle and seduction. A society that understood the power of entertainment to control and manipulate. So next time someone waxes poetic about the grandeur of ancient Rome, remember there's more lurking beneath the marble facade than meets the eye. The Colosseum wasn't just an amphitheater. It was a snapshot of Roman life, with all its splendor and squalor. And as we continue our journey through this ancient world, remember that history is as much about the stories we tell ourselves as it is about the stories we uncover. And now, as we turn our gaze from the roaring crowd to the dusty arena below, let's talk about the real stars of this show, the gladiators. These aren't just muscle-bound action figures springing to life. They're the ancient equivalent of celebrity athletes, only with a slightly more life-threatening job description. The myth of the glamorous, fearless gladiator is deeply ingrained in our imaginations. Thanks, Hollywood. But the reality, It's a bit more survivor of the fittest than hero of the people. First off, let's shatter the illusion that gladiators were all slaves or criminals. Sure, many were, but not all. Some were volunteers. Yes, volunteers, who signed up for the chance at glory and a payday that was as elusive as a Roman tax refund. These fighters were a mixed bag, coming from across the empire, but they all ended up in the same place, the gladiator school, or asterisk ludus asterisk. Think of it as a cross between a training camp and a prison, with less freedom and more whips. The training regime was no joke. Gladiators trained daily under the watchful eyes of asterisk Lannisty asterisk, their trainers, who were part coach, part drill sergeant, and part talent scout. The diet was high in carbs, low in protein, lots of barley and beans. Believe it or not, these guys were the original carb loaders, aiming for a layer of fat to protect vital organs during fights. Forget the chiseled abs. They were after survival, not a magazine cover. The conditions, Spartan, to put it mildly. Gladiators lived in cramped quarters with the constant reminder of their mortality. Mortality rates were as high as 1 in 5 per fight, depending on the period and the whims of the crowd. The myth that every fight was to the death is just that, a myth. Killing valuable fighters was bad business. After all, a good gladiator was a significant investment, and nobody likes to see their investment bleed out on the sand. Speaking of investments, the economics of gladiators is a tale of high stakes and higher costs. Training a gladiator wasn't cheap. It was a full package deal. Food, housing, medical care, and of course, weapons and armor. It's estimated that maintaining a single fighter could cost up to 2,000 sesterces annually, a princely sum when you consider that a Roman soldier earned about 900 sesterces a year. Gladiators were commodities, and the best ones were worth their weight in gold, or at least silver. Now, let's tackle the political angle. Gladiators were more than just arena fodder. They were pawns in a larger game. Emperors used these spectacles as a form of propaganda, showcasing their power and generosity to the public. Gladiators became symbols, embodying the virtues of Rome, courage, strength, and loyalty. The state manipulated their image, turning them into living billboards for Roman values. The politics of the arena were as brutal as the fights themselves. Emperors often financed lavish games to curry favor with the masses. Julius Caesar famously threw games with over 300 pairs of gladiators. That's more blood and sand than a Game of Thrones season finale. These spectacles weren't just entertainment. They were a tool to stabilize power and distract from political unrest. And let's not forget the role of the crowd. The Roman citizens were not passive observers. Their cheers or jeers could decide a fighter's fate. Thumbs up or down. Well, actually, that's another myth. The exact gestures used remain a mystery, but the crowd certainly held sway over life and death decisions. It was democracy at its most primal, where the voice of the people could literally end a life. But here's the kicker. Despite their harsh lives, successful gladiators could achieve fame and fortune. The best of them were akin to modern sports stars, complete with groupies and fan clubs. A particularly skilled fighter might win his freedom and retire to a life of relative comfort. Some even became trainers themselves, perpetuating the cycle of blood and glory. So, why do we still romanticize the gladiator? Maybe it's the allure of their defiance against fate, their struggle against insurmountable odds. Or perhaps it's because, at the heart of it, their story is our story. A tale of survival, ambition, and the quest for recognition. In a world that was as unpredictable as it was unforgiving, gladiators represented the ultimate underdog, fighting not just for victory, but for their very lives. As we dig deeper into the gritty underpinnings of gladiator culture, let's keep our eyes peeled for the next chapter in this saga of blood, sweat, and spectacle. The games were more than just fights. They were a reflection of the society that craved them, a mirror held up to the vast expanse of the Roman Empire. Stay tuned, because the story of the Colosseum and its fearless fighters is far from over. We've only begun to scratch the surface of this ancient drama. So, as we peel back the layers of the Colosseum's allure, it's time to dive into the ripples this grand arena sent throughout Roman society. Picture a place where a Saturday afternoon activity involved not just watching, but cheering on brutal mortal combat. The Colosseum was less about the sport, and more about shaping the social psyche. A bit like binge-watching a gruesome series on Netflix, but with a lot more sand and a lot less buffering. Let's talk about desensitization to violence. You might think today's media can be intense, but the Romans had a front-row seat to the real deal. When you regularly witness sword fights ending in blood and guts, your threshold for violence skyrockets. The Colosseum served as a school of hard knocks, conditioning citizens to numbness. Imagine a populace so accustomed to brutality that they could shrug off the horrors of war or the execution of a political rival with the same ease as missing the start of a chariot race. Why did this matter? The Romans were a people of conquest, and maintaining an empire that stretched from Britain to Egypt wasn't exactly a peaceful picnic. The spectacles helped cultivate a culture where violence was normalized. It was like a collective armor, toughening the psyche of Roman citizens who, in turn, became more resilient soldiers, ready to expand the empire's borders without flinching at the prospect of bloodshed. The Colosseum was more than an arena. It was a psychological workshop designed to harden its audience against the harsh realities of imperial life. Now, let's stir in some political distraction into this bubbling cauldron of spectacle. The emperors, those cunning political magicians, used the games as a sleight of hand to divert the public's gaze from Rome's less savory issues, like economic disparity or political corruption. Picture this, a city abuzz with gossip about the latest gladiator match, rather than grumbling over the latest tax hike. Bread and circuses indeed, but more circus than bread. Take Emperor Commodus, for example, a ruler as fond of the arena as he was of his own reflection. He didn't just sponsor games, he participated in them, allegedly dispatching 100 lions in one morning. His antics turned him into a living legend, distracting from his rather questionable leadership skills. By making himself the star of the show, Commodus kept the focus on the spectacle, rather than the crumbling state of his administration. It was a masterclass in political misdirection, with the emperor himself as both conductor and performer. The Colosseum spectacles weren't just about the immediate thrill. They were a strategic tool for maintaining social order. The emperors understood that a captivated populace was a compliant one. When the masses were busy chanting for their favorite gladiators, they weren't plotting revolts or questioning imperial policies. The games were a pressure valve, releasing societal tensions through orchestrated chaos. But let's not pin the blame solely on the emperors. The public, too, played its part in this grand theater of cruelty. They weren't just passive victims of manipulation, they actively fed the beast. The roar of the crowd, the bets placed on fighters, the eager anticipation of the next match, these were the pulse of Roman society. Citizens craved the adrenaline rush, the communal experience, the shared spectacle of life and death. It was a social glue, binding them together in a shared narrative of power and survival. Now, let's sprinkle in a few myths for flavor. The romantic image of the noble gladiator, fighting with honor and dignity, was as much a creation of the public's imagination as it was of imperial propaganda. Sure, there were moments of heroism, but they were often overshadowed by the grim reality of blood sport. The truth was more complex, a dance between heroism and horror, with the line between the two as blurred as a gladiator's vision after a particularly brutal bout. And yet, these myths served a purpose. They offered the public a story they wanted to believe, a tale of valor in the face of adversity. It was a form of collective storytelling, where the audience could project their hopes and fears onto the sand-stained stage. The spectacles provided an escape, a narrative that transcended the mundane struggles of daily life, even if only for a few fleeting hours. So, here we are, deep in the heart of the Colosseum's societal impact. The games were a reflection of Rome itself, a mirror held up to an empire that thrived on conquest and spectacle. They teased out the complexities of human nature, revealing a society that was both captivated by and complicit in its own manipulation. The Colosseum wasn't just a monument to Roman engineering. It was a testament to the empire's understanding of power, how to wield it, how to maintain it, and how to distract from its darker machinations. As we wrap our heads around this ancient drama, remember that the story doesn't end here. The Colosseum's echoes continue to reverberate through history, and the next chapter holds even more secrets to uncover. So, stay tuned as we continue to unravel the intricate tapestry of Rome's most infamous arena. The saga is far from over, and the sands of history still have tales to tell. Yet as the echoes of the Colosseum's last roar faded, Rome itself began to unravel like an ancient toga caught on a thorn. The glory days of the empire turned brittle under the weight of overextension, corruption, and economic turmoil. You see, the empire was like a colossal statue with feet of clay, impressive at a distance, but oh so vulnerable when the ground started shaking. And shake it did, as barbarian invasions, internal strife, and a series of less-than-stellar emperors chipped away at its foundations. As the empire's fortunes waned, so too did the extravagant spectacles of the Colosseum. Gone were the days when emperors like Trajan could boast of games featuring thousands of gladiators and wild beasts. By the 4th century AD, the public coffers weren't exactly overflowing, and funding these costly bloodbaths became as unsustainable as a Roman toga party without wine. The pragmatic shift in priorities was clear. Rome needed to focus on defense and stability rather than entertain a bloodthirsty crowd with lavish displays of excess. Economically, the empire was on shaky ground. Inflation soared like a runaway chariot, and the currency, once as solid as Roman engineering, became a shadow of its former self. The silver content of the denarius dwindled, reflecting the empire's declining fortunes. With less money to throw at spectacles, emperors found it increasingly difficult to justify the expense of games that no longer served their political purposes. The bread and circuses formula was losing its magic, as the bread became stale and the circuses fewer and far between. Politically, the Colosseum's significance as a tool of propaganda and control diminished. The rise of Christianity played a part in this shift, with early Christians condemning the games as barbaric and immoral as the new faith gained traction. And with Emperor Constantine's conversion in the early 4th century, the arena's bloody spectacles began to clash with the evolving moral compass of Roman society. The gladiatorial games, once the epitome of Roman virtues, now stood as a relic of a pagan past, increasingly at odds with the empire's new Christian identity. By the time the Western Roman Empire finally gasped its last breath in 476 AD, the Colosseum was already a shadow of its former glory. The structure itself, once the pride of Roman architecture, began its slow transformation from a bustling hub of entertainment to a decaying monument of bygone days. Stone by stone, the Colosseum was pilfered and repurposed as a handy quarry for builders looking to plunder its marble and travertine. The arena that had once hosted epic battles now found itself at the mercy of time and neglect. Despite this decline, the Colosseum's legacy is anything but forgotten. Even today, it stands as an enduring symbol of Roman ambition, ingenuity, and yes, a touch of their darker inclinations. We gaze upon its weathered walls and imagine the roar of the crowd, the clash of swords, and the drama that unfolded within. It's proof that humans are drawn to spectacle and drama, no matter the era. The myths surrounding the Colosseum persist, intricately woven into the fabric of modern culture. Hollywood has done its part, painting gladiators as noble warriors and arenas as places of high-stakes drama. But as seductive as these tales may be, they often gloss over the harsher truths, the exploitation, the political machinations, and the economic realities that underpin those games. The Colosseum was a stage not just for gladiators, but for the empire itself, a reflection of its might and its mortality. In many ways, the allure of the Colosseum mirrors our own obsession with spectacle. Whether it's in sports arenas, cinemas, or online platforms, the human appetite for drama and competition remains insatiable. We may no longer cheer for bloodshed, or at least not literally, but the essence of those ancient games persists in our quest for heroes, our love for narratives of triumph and defeat, and our penchant for turning entertainment into a societal glue. So, as we wrap up our journey through the sands of the Colosseum, let's remember that history is more than a series of dates and events. It's a tapestry of human experiences, woven with threads of ambition, power, and spectacle. The Colosseum story is a reminder that the past, while distant, is never truly gone. It echoes in our cultures, our stories, and yes, our myths. And as we stand in the shadow of its ancient arches, we are reminded of the enduring power of history to captivate, to teach, and to reflect our own humanity back at us. As you tuck these insights away, perhaps for a late-night pondering or a bit of cocktail party trivia, think of the Colosseum not just as a relic of a bygone era, but as a mirror held up to the complexities of human nature. A testament to our fascination with spectacle, our ability to mythologize, and our never-ending quest to understand the world and ourselves through the stories we tell.